Hey, warmer friendly hello! Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We've got an excellent podcast for you as we're going to be joined in segment number 2 by Rocco Miller, who does such great work over at Bracketeer.org. We're going to chat with him about how we've been seeing some carnage here in some of these conferences. We're going to take a look at some of the little guys. We're going to take a look at some of the top teams in the sport. He also does great work over at Basket Under Review. He does some great work over at Field of 68 as well. He's a very well-rounded man, and we've got ourselves a Monday slate that is built for us too. Not necessarily a lot of ranked teams, but we've got ourselves a lot of very fascinating teams to say the least. So we'll be talking a little bit of Coastal Conference. We'll be talking a lot about these mid-majors like the Southland that are going to be in action. So lots of good, clean family fun there. In the final segment, going to get you guys picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Monday as we hit some bank shots. If you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one or two ways we'll fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at G_81. Keep in mind, RCM, maybe does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Well, I did not get in any Twitter/X questions today. We had ourselves a lot of fun in college basketball on Sunday. Let's take a look back at it, try to find some trends, and try to get to know these teams a little bit better.
Games from yesterday is Greg buzzing about. Here is the rowdy recap.
Lone ranked team in action was Houston, and boy, oh boy, did they pelt Arizona State. 103-73 is the final. As for Houston, 12 of 25 from three-point range. Arizona State pretty much dared Houston to run with them, and Houston just ran them out of the building. For Houston, they go 40 of 71 from the floor, 20 points out of Kingston Flemings, Miles Uzan, Emmanuel Sharp at 16 points apiece. For Arizona State, they lose a rebound battle 33-30. They actually go 9 of 25 from 3, but they lost that turnover battle 17-10. So nice, clean domination there from Houston. Then, if you're looking at more of your unranked teams, it's been a rough year for Memphis, but they were laying over 20 points against UTSA. Meet the Roadrunners, man. It has not been a great season for our good friends the Roadrunners. They lose in this game by a count of 95-69, and if you're looking at your bottom cover teams in all of college basketball, poor UTSA. Like, I like Austin Clounch as a coach. I want to be able to say meet the Roadrunners a little bit more proudly, but now they are 3-13 against the spread. Only Texas Southern has a worse cover percentage right now than UTSA, so that has been not great. As Doug McDaniel, 18 points, 6 boards, 6 assists. Memphis goes out there, dominates that game. Out there in the American, how about Florida Atlantic and the way that they've been able to cover games? They are able to get the winning cover against Temple Go Owls, as they are now 13-4 against the spread. Actually, both teams are Owls, by the way, but that said, 79-73. Florida Atlantic, they do find a way to persevere as they go 3 of 19 from 3 points, but off the bench, Josiah Parker, 22 points, 10 of 13 from the floor. For Florida Atlantic, they do a nice job winning the turnover battle in this one, 15-10. They do lose the rebound battle, 41-39, but for Temple, they only go 6 of 22 from three-point range themselves, so that was a quality win for Florida Atlantic. It's been a rough year for Maryland, but they take it to Penn State, 96-73 the final. They were up 56-26 at the FS. Penn State actually goes 9 of 24 from 3. Maryland, 18 out of 34 from 3. David Hewitt, 43 points, 9 of 15 from three-point range. For Maryland, they lose the turnover battle 11-7, but they win the rebound battle 39-21. And when you go 18 of 34 from three-point range, well, you better win that game, and they were certainly able to do so. Also out there in the American, been a rough year for East Carolina, 73-70. Charlotte, they are able to get the job done there, and for East Carolina now 5-12 against the spread this season. They've been rough with their three-point shooting, and they were actually okay in this game, 6 of 16 from three-point range, but they lose a rebound battle 37-23, 12 of 18 at three line for them. Charlotte, they were able to go 11 of 13 at the charity stripe, so a nice winner for Charlotte. And Tulsa now 10-5-1 against the spread. It's been a little bit herky-jerky for them over the last few games, but they do get back on track. They're able to lay it on UAB 99-77. The final is for the Blazers, 5 of 15 from 3, but Tulsa 12 of 26 from 3-point. Tulsa wins the rebound battle 37-28, and for Tulsa, they do lose the turnover battle 10-5, but they had a nice performance here from David Green, 26 points. Miles Barnstable, he contributes 25 points himself, and Wichita State solid as well, 11-7 against the spread. They needed overtime against South Florida as Wichita State led by 15 in the first half, got down 12 points in the second half, and then they come all the way back, 86-85 the final. So that's another over in a South Florida game. As for South Florida, 12 of 28 from 3, but Wichita State 12 of 23 from 3 with Keenan Giles. He goes on his 2-point shots, a nice hearty 3 of 13, but 5 of 9 from 3, 22 big points out of him. And for this Wichita State team, they play even up on the turnover battle, 11-11. They win the rebound battle, 49-42. So nice quality winner out there. American in the lone extra game, they take down Army 78-67. Army is taking a whole bunch of threes this season. They're not hitting a ton of them. They go 7-25 from 3-point range here. So American, they do find a way to be able to get a nice quality cover out there. Oakland, they take it to a UW Green Bay team that all of a sudden has been relatively good against the spread. This is a first loss for UW Green Bay here in this calendar year. UW Green Bay now 11-7 against the spread. Oakland's actually 12-7 against the spread, and this game was not even close. As for Oakland, 88-63 from the finalize for Bari Navarua. He was able to give you 26 points, 10 rebounds. He had 10 boards out of Isaac Garrett as well. For Green Bay, they just have not been great on the boards. They lose the rebound battle 42-24, and for UW Green Bay, a nice hearty 5 of 24 from 3. Marcus Hall went 2 of 3 from 3. That means that the rest of the team went a nice 3 of 21 from 3-point range. So that was a little bit less than spectacular. And UW Milwaukee now 7-12 against the spread. They're missing their top rebounder right now, Daniil Ojanovic, and boy is it showing. As Purdue Fort Wayne, they took it to them 100-84. As Mikhail Stevenson, he was able to go out for 34 points, 6 assists. UW Green Bay, UW Milwaukee does win the rebound battle 34-31, but Purdue Fort Wayne, a bottom 10 team in terms of rebound percentage, they go 13 out of 23 from 3-point range. So not great for UW Milwaukee there, to say the least. This was pretty rock solid, though, as North Texas, who had scored 65 points or fewer in every one of their road/neutral court games this season, they take it to Tulane by a kind of 71-63 the final. Tulane goes 8-24 from 3, and not like North Texas went into flamethrower mode. They go 7-22 from 3-point range, but 19 points out of David Terrell in this game. For North Texas, they actually lose the turnover battle 15-12, but 47-30. They're able to win that rebound battle. It's been a up and down year for really both of these teams, but now for Tulane, they're down to 7-10 against the spread this far this season. North Texas is up to 10-6 against the spread, despite the fact that the outright results have not necessarily been there for them. And then you did see in the nightcap San Francisco not be able to get the cover, but they do get the win over Washington State, 85-80. The final is for the Dons. They're still missing one of their main guys in Mookie Cook, but 12 of 22 from 3 gets them by. Washington State, they were very comparable, 10-21 from 3-point. San Francisco was able to win the rebound battle 30-23, and for San Francisco, they lose the turnover battle 12-10, but 15 out of 18 at the free throw line to be able to get the job done. Line was right around 5.5-6, so Washington State does get the cover there. And if you're taking a look at trend-wise, what we're getting in college basketball right now, it has been a very overwhelming start to conference play. If you look at the last 7 days in college basketball, overs are hitting at a rate of 53.1%, 172 for the overs, 152 for the unders, and I believe that you've had a push or two along the way as well. And underdogs are absolutely cooking, 182 and 142 against the spread over the last 7 days. Last 7 days, underdogs hitting at 56.2%, and overall for the season, underdogs are hitting at 51.2%, 1591 and 1515. Meanwhile, the over rate about 50.2%, 1,559 overs to 1,548 under. So that's where we're seeing college basketball right now, and that's where we're finding trend-wise. Coming up next, how about if we do chat it up with our good friend Rocco Miller of Bracketeer.org right here on Chris Seats with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Side edge this college basketball season? Well, VSiN experts use CBB Analytics, the most comprehensive college basketball analytics platform in the world. See injury impact, on and off data, clutch time performance metrics, first versus second half splits, and so much more. Utilize the promo code of VSiN, that is VSIN, to get $30 off and find your betting edge over at cbbanalytics.com. That is cbbanalytics, all one word.com. For anyone that is new to VSiN, well, I wish you a friendly hello. This is an attention to anyone that is new to VSiN because you're able to get some free stuff with our daily newsletter. It's a great way to catch up on everything that's happening in the sports betting world. It's delivered straight to your inbox every single morning. VSiN's newsletter offers picks, data, strategies for the day's betting menu, and so much more. Sign up for free today over at VSiN.com/newsletter. That's VSIN.com/newsletter, and start receiving your free newsletter tomorrow morning. That is VSIN.com/newsletter. Stay ahead of the game and bet smarter with VSiN. back here in lovely Las Vegas. We're Coast to Coast with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Always great to be joined by this man, as we've got Rocco Miller aboard. He does an incredible job over at Bracketeer.org, looking at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. I know that he does a great job dialing in on this board with every single conference, as he's one of the best bracketologists that you're going to find out there. And for those that know bracketology, you get the same amount of points correct when you get those 1 seeds right as you do the 16 seeds. So he does a great job of looking at this great game. Very fitting for this Monday with so many great games coming up. You're able to follow him on the old Twitter/X at his first and last name, Rocco Miller, the number 8 altogether. Additionally, does a great job over at Basket Under Review, Field of 68, and so much more. And Rocco, it's great to have you on. Thank you.
Greg, great to be with you. Thanks again for having me. It's been a adventurous weekend, and we still have a long ways to go because it is a very busy Martin Luther King Day. And I love how each year, and I got to be a part of this last year, they wrapped the night up with North Carolina Hampton on CBS Sports Network. This year it'll be at Hampton, but I had the pleasure of being there at A&T last year. Just a special day for them to get the spotlight. It's sold out. People dancing in the crowd during halftime and during all TV timeouts, actually. The band going nuts. Tune into that. So the day won't be over even at 9 Eastern tomorrow night.
Absolutely. You always hear about the SWAC and the MEAC bands. North Carolina, A&T, and Hampton, they used to be out in those two conferences. They've brought that now to the Coastal Conference, so that is going to be a great game. That's going to be a fun one, and we really have a lot of great action in general on Monday. You mentioned it, have a little bit of Coastal action, a little bit of Metro Atlantic, some Atlantic 10, and just how do you take a look at some of these mid-majors right now? Because we've seen a little bit of separation in some of them, but it felt like High Point was going to run and hide with the Big South. We saw them get completely pounded a few days ago by Winthrop. The Southland has been really interesting. With McNeese, they've been relatively dominant, but still, I think that there might be a little bit of resistance there. And some of these teams that we thought were so high and mighty, some of them have been knocked down a little bit, and we're getting some really competitive conference races.
We are, and there's been carnage in a lot of races as well. As you mentioned, the Big South, one piece of that story. Winthrop, a very interesting team, whereas last year, High Point's defense was very drop heavy with Alan Huss at the helm. With Flynn Clayman taking over there, they've been a lot more perimeter and switching on ball screens and less gap coverage in where the drop zone used to be. Winthrop was totally built to expose that. So I think High Point Winthrop matchup just going forward, they'll play again and then perhaps in the Big South tournament, is a very unique matchup. And that's representative of what you see in so many leagues, especially in the one bid leagues like the Big South, is you got to understand the matchups in terms of defensive scheme. I'm more of a scheme over substance guy typically. Obviously, you got to have talent to beat the best teams in the league. But as long as you're looking at maybe the cluster of the top 4 or 5 contenders, once they start matching up with each other, that's where the scheme and the X's and O's really have a big impact. I think on Monday we'll see, for starters, the Ivy League had even more chaos on Saturday. They get back out there Monday. Penn and Harvard are 2 of the 5, Greg, teams at the top at 2-1. We have a 5-way tie entering Monday, so we got to start breaking some of these ties. That particular matchup will help. And then Yale, even though Columbia is not in the tie, Yale's kind of still the leader in the clubhouse in terms of all the power metrics, the team expected to win the league, preseason pick. And Columbia is going to come into this game against Yale very hungry. They just dropped 2 in a row. They're down to 1-2, a heartbreaker in overtime at Brown on Saturday. Again, it's all about how you respond in league play, not just for Columbia, but for everybody. And I'm always a little bit more like you're going to get Columbia's best effort. So Yale's got to be ready for that. Of course, the other team in the mix is still Princeton, who has played so much better of late. They knocked off that Yale team and really collapsed against Harvard after having a big lead on Saturday. They've got to turn around and go to Dartmouth, and that will be a big test. Dartmouth's the other 2-1. So we have a big matchup with Princeton and Dartmouth. So the winner of Princeton-Dartmouth and the winner of Penn-Harvard could potentially join Yale if Yale gets by Columbia, make it a 3-way tie instead of a 5-way tie. The Ivy League is just pure chaos. And we didn't expect that. This was a league that we thought maybe Yale could run away with. I think the league is so unique because it's only 14 total games. Every game, and this is from multiple coaches in the league, is treated like a playoff game. And that's why you see so many great adjustments from timeout to timeout. They really are coaching their butts off because if you do not make the top 4 in this league, you do not go to Ivy Madness, and your season is effectively over. I think you have to start there with all the best for tomorrow, but I do think in the A-10 there's a showdown between George Washington and George Mason. George Mason right now is right on my cut line for bracketology. Again, we're so early in that process. That's not the focus, but it shows you that George Mason's got to continue to prove themselves. They had one game all season against a team that's tournament level. That was Virginia Tech. Even Virginia Tech's maybe just barely out today. They failed in that attempt. They lost by 11 on the road, tough place, but the jury is out on George Mason despite their awesome 17-1, 5-0 A10 record. They host a really talented George Washington team with an elite top 40 offense for the season. But if you go by Torvik data, Greg, George Washington's a top 15 offense in their last 8 performances. That includes a game with Florida. And so I think George Mason's defense has really got to rise to the occasion, which it has several times over the years. In these last few performances, though, allowing 80 to VCU, allowing 74 at Loyola Chicago last Tuesday, they really got to be dialed in to slow down this GW group. I think that is not only the best A10 game, it could be the best game in the country. And last but not least, I think you got to look at the Southland, which had all sorts of chaos on Saturday. UTRGV knocks off McNeese in a very surprising win, a game where they got up by nearly 20 early and held on for dear life to win by 3. McNeese is now 2 losses in the Southland, something we're not used to saying in this recent era of an influx of Cash and Will Wade and now Bill Armstrong. They got to go back on the road again. It's a very pesky Texas A&M Corpus Christi program led by my friend Jim Shaw. They play great defense and strategy, a lot of zone coverage. McNeese, of course, will be hungry, but Corpus Christi is a little bit lower in the standings than they want to be. I think you're going to get such a great fight in that particular game. Now you have Stephen F. Austin leading the league at 8-1, but they're going to Nichols, who's 7-2. And Nichols just took a surprising home loss to Lamar. They're coming off of a 2-game losing streak after starting 7-0. So what a showdown between SFA and Nichols. So those 2 games in the Southland should be spectacular.
Oh, I am very here for the Southland. It's going to be a lot of fun. The America East might be down, but you know that those games are going to be competitive as well. So we've got a lot of great games for Monday as Rocco Miller does such great work over at Bracketeer.org. He's joining me on Kuska Soups, and we talked about with regards to more of these mid-major conferences and the fact that maybe those presumed favorites are struggling a little bit. And we're just seeing that all across college basketball because it felt like the big 3 coming into conference play was Michigan, Iowa State, and Arizona. And to the credit of Arizona, even though they got a little bit of a test from Arizona State, they've really been able to stave off any sort of, like, shall we say, big giant sweats other than maybe that game against UConn. But we saw Michigan knock down a peg, Iowa State back-to-back losses. Just what are you making out of the landscape in college basketball? Because I will admittedly throw this out here as well. I thought that perhaps we were going to get what we got last year where you had like 3 or 4 dominant teams and then everyone else. But it's appearing as though here early on in conference play that is not the case. And we've got many more teams that are vying for a title than it feels like we had 12 months ago.
We do, yeah. And I think it's been interesting. I think that going through the bracket forecasting process for the first time last week really showed me some things early to track, and that evolved over the past couple of days this weekend as well. As I think we are looking at, it's funny because when you try to separate teams throughout the bracket forecasting process, sometimes, most of the time I should say, it's very difficult to separate teams. You have things you like about them, some things that are negatives, and it can be difficult to make that decision. Well, right now we have a very clear top 16 in college basketball. I don't think there's much room for argument to put anybody 17th or lower above this top 16, at least from a bracket forecasting standpoint. Now, Florida obviously got the big win at Vanderbilt. Clemson has been playing very well, just got another really good win over Miami at home. Those 2 teams are knocking on the door big time for the top 16. But if you take a look at where it was going into the weekend, Texas Tech was 16th, huge win over BYU, but it wasn't to the point where BYU doesn't belong in there anymore. They're still clearly a top 16 team. You saw Virginia. They were also barely in. They go to SMU. What a week for Virginia. They win at SMU and Louisville. Then you have Alabama. They've done enough throughout the year to where you would hate to even try to remove them from this list of 16. Maybe Florida or Clemson will take their spot sooner or later. And besides that, Iowa State, Vanderbilt, and you mentioned it, Michigan a little bit, have started to fall back to the pack. Meanwhile, Illinois might be the hottest team in the country that nobody's talking about. They're all the way up to 6th in Ken Palm. Their metrics on both offense and defense at the rim and from the perimeter suggest they're a possible national championship contender in the Illini. You have Michigan State, who's remarkably consistent. And then you kind of have the usual suspects. I saw Duke last week in person, win at Cal. UConn's UConn. They had a couple close wins, but they were both on the road. Had to really sweat Georgetown, scraped by Seton Hall, but they're still UConn. At this point, you're playing league games, and this goes back to your question, to where the rest of the league you're competing against, those teams from a roster construction standpoint were all built to compete with the top dogs. And so you're finally seeing a bunch of fair fights, and after a while, that grind is going to get to almost every team. It probably will get to every team to a point where you have a bad performance or two and you slip back to 1-loss, 2-loss, 3-loss record. And that's why it's just too hard for anybody to go undefeated these days.
Oh, it absolutely is. And I don't think we're ever going to see a team go 40-0, but man, I mean, it is absolutely wild what we've been seeing in college basketball with those top teams. I do agree with you. I do think that there's a little bit of a divide between those top 16 and everyone else, but how big of a surprise are some of those teams in the top 16? Because even though Vanderbilt has been knocked down a little bit of a notch, they've taken a few losses, they've been looking rock solid. And I know that you alerted me to this team before the start of the season. You were saying to me, hey, more I look at this Nebraska team, the more that they might be able to do a little bit of something. I feel like Nebraska, even though they have 0 losses, they're still a team that's hiding out there in plain sight. And just time and time again, it feels like there are so many people who are doubting this team. And time again, they just keep getting the job done.
They do, yeah. And I mean, their defense is like a lot better than it was
and
early on.
And they dare you to shoot threes.
They do. And it's working in most cases. They had the one game they should have lost, Greg. They were down 16 at Indiana, and that was a perfect storm to get back in it and run out of there with a win. That might have been their one loss. They win the game anyway. They also had the Illinois game where it was kind of the opposite of the Indiana game. They had the 16-point lead. Illinois came all the way back and tied it. Nebraska hit the big shot late. So they have had their handful of nice moments there to get by a couple big-time road wins. Will it sustain itself? We don't know. But I think some of the things you can lay your hat on for a long-term success formula, which I think is clearly in place now for Nebraska, is a rock-solid defense lately, performing as the 7th best defense in the country over the last month. They actually aren't that great at defending the three. They're good at getting teams to stop taking as many threes as they want. And I think that's been a big help in terms of a scheme strategy standpoint. And then interior-wise, they're a top 30 against the two-point shot defense. They won't foul you, so it's hard to get free points against Nebraska. And they're an elite defensive rebounding team. They're also forcing turnovers at a top 20 level. I think all of those things help Nebraska on the nights where their offense isn't as electric as they have been. Obviously, there's a tight brotherhood between the team, too, and I think that's the other part I wanted to highlight. When you have guys like Jamarcus Lawrence and Rink Moss and an emergence of Berkey Burnbuckle, who really struggled at UCLA and is finally coming into his long-term hype. Sam Hoiberg doesn't get better than a glue guy than him, the coach's kid, and really involved with everything Nebraska. He announces women's basketball games on their off days.
Yes.
And, you can just tell, even though Connor Essegian is hurt, he's a huge team guy. These guys are like really, really connected, and that's really hard to do at the Power 5 level. But maybe that's where Nebraska has the edge, because when you're out there in Lincoln, Nebraska, you're in a true college town, and these guys have really learned how to lean into each other. And that's become just a sum is greater than its parts scenario, and we'll see how far it can go.
Oh, I absolutely love the saying on this podcast, the whole being greater than the sum of its parts. And for Rink Moss, he has been so good for this team. I absolutely love watching Nebraska play, and certainly has been one of the best stories in all of college basketball. Need to get those guys their first NCAA tournament win, as Rocco Miller is doing such great work over at bracketeer.org. He's showing me on Coast to Coast Hoops. And Rocco, just taking a look at the landscape of college basketball, I think we both agree. I don't think that anyone really saw Nebraska being undefeated at this point. Here they are. They've been one of the better surprises. But who are a few other teams that stand out to you that just have been really pleasant surprises thus far this season, and you're curious to see if they can keep it going the next few weeks?
Yeah, I mean, Nebraska is kind of the best answer to that question. Oh. Vanderbilt, of course, was the answer for a while. Now they've got to figure out how to correct a few things, but really no shame in their 2 losses. It's just, some detail stuff where they let it slip in the end. One team that's just recently hot is Texas A&M. They're 6-1 in their last 7. They're tied for first in the SEC, and I think it's really shocked most of the SEC because coming out of non-conference play, the Aggies were 10-3, but they lost by 24 to Oklahoma State. They lost by 12 to UCF at home and took another loss to SMU. And I think they just weren't taken too seriously. They were clearly not looked at as a tournament team entering league play. But that magical win, as controversial as it may or may not have been at Auburn, has really ignited this group. It did fall in double overtime at Tennessee, game they had plenty of chances to win. And I thought the road win at Texas was a very mature response to the Tennessee heartbreak. And they're still sitting there at 4-1. The only one-loss teams in the league right now are them and the Gators. Now Texas A&M gets to host Mississippi State, South Carolina before going to Georgia and Alabama. But I think when they go to Georgia January 31st, they now project to be a 6-1 SEC team and clearly a safe tournament team for tomorrow's projection, Greg. So that's one where I'm curious how far they can go once they get to some tougher SEC trips. I also think, at this point in time, Clemson's been red hot, and I love the way they're defending. They're not winning in a sexy way, but do they ever? And in the report I pulled, like the last month or so, they're the number one defense in America. That's fascinating to me because they bring in Carter Welling from Utah Valley. You've got Justin Porter, who was an absolute menace for all those years for Middle Tennessee, just a program Middle Tennessee, pedigreed in defense. And now Clemson has this kid. You have some other monsters like Jake Wallen, who's been around the Clemson program to help glue those guys in to the scheme. Nick Davidson is a huge body from Nevada. Yeah, they're winning a bunch of games in the low 60s, low 70s, but the way they were able to gobble up an NBA-laden roster in Miami and hold them to 59, that's a big statement in my opinion. And they also, SMU has a ton of talent. They did similar things to them a couple weeks ago. They haven't hit their big time games yet. Like the ACC has a very fat middle this year, which is exciting for the league. But when they get to the heavyweights, they don't go to Duke till Valentine's Day. The Louisville, Carolina stretch is at the very end. And so, their next 5 games are NC State, who again looks very disappointing so far. So that's a really interesting game coming on Tuesday. But after that, it's Georgia Tech, Pittsburgh, and then at Stanford and Cal. We'll see what they look like out here. But a real good chance to get to 21-3 if they navigate that the way they've been playing. And if they do that, they would be 11-0 in the ACC. Can you believe that?
That would be absolutely wild. And the ACC has had a nice come up this year. I mean, it's been a little bit wobbly for Louisville. I know that Duke has had a few struggles as well, but that middle of the conference has been so bad for so long. It feels like, really, other than Boston College, the conference as a whole has been very much improved. So that's been nice to see. And we've got ourselves a lot of great stories in college basketball right now. Rocco, you're doing a great job of covering them all. You do a great job from everything from the mid-majors to the absolute creme de la creme, bracketology, and so much more. So love to get people at home know what's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yeah, appreciate it, Greg. Well, bracketology's here, so perfect timing for the show today. Coming this Tuesday, the next bracket update will be posted because of the holiday. We'll wait for the Monday results to come in. So look for that Tuesday morning in your inbox or on your Twitter feed at Rocco Miller 8. The website is bracketeer.org, doing great things on the site in terms of the bracket forecast, the insight on how the bracket is built. You can find that on the bracketology and Inside the Bracket tabs. We also have an Inside College Hoop section, and the great Robert LaStella out of Florida Atlantic was up in Philadelphia this weekend covering the St. John's Villanova game, covering Temple and Florida Atlantic on Sunday, and doing some pieces for us in that section. So thanks to Robbie, and thanks for everybody coming on and donating to the site. We really appreciate that. It allows us to do cool trips like that. Outside of that, we have Field of 68 mid-major show every Thursday, 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific. We also have Fielding the 68, everybody's favorite show, coming back Mondays and Fridays. That debut will now be January 26th. We were looking to maybe get one in tomorrow, but because of the holiday, we just decided we'll have everybody wait another week. So look for that starting Monday, January 26th. And it'll be every Monday and Friday, 5 Eastern, live on any of the Field of 68 platforms, Twitter, YouTube, or elsewhere. And then last but not least, Basket Under Review. I am doing exclusive interviews with conference commissioners, selection committee members, and the like. So some of those newer interviews will start to resurface now as we get closer to the March Madness, the special selection Sunday date that we all have circled. And I also do a Teams of the Week column every week, which gives out 5 national awards and also recognizes a team of the week in every conference, all 31 conferences. It's a great way for you to catch up if you were busy over the weekend. You can come in and see who's playing the best in each league and really who's on the rise. So I really enjoy doing that. Hopefully everybody's getting a kick out of that. Thanks again for having me, Greg.
Absolutely. Rocco is doing an incredible job looking at this great game of college basketball. He's dialed in on every single conference, and every single time he joins me, he lends incredible insight. So big thanks to Rocco for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. And coming up next, it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Monday as we hit some makeups. Here, lovely Las Vegas, for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Always great to be joined by Rocco Miller, does such great work over at Bracketeer.org, Basket Under Review, Field of 68, you name it, he does it every single time he joins me, lends such great insights, and he did so once again today. So a big thanks to Rocco for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Monday as we hit some bank shots.
Most financial establishments close at a certain time, but not here. It is time for a side and total on every game on today's betting board bank shots.
Do note that as per usual, any changes are made to these plays will be listed up on my Twitter/X feed at gunit_81. We're going to be going in Las Vegas rotation order. This is the bigger conference games in time order, and then these are the conferences that are on the extra games board for today. The MEAC, the SWAC, the Southland, the Atlantic Sun, if we were to have any Atlantic Sun games, the NEC. I think we might have a Patriot League game in there as well. Could be mistaken on that, but those smaller conferences, those are going to be at the bottom. If I didn't say it, NEC and America East, they are down there as well. So how about if we do get things started? This is game number 851, 852 on the card. Northeastern, they are on the road. They're facing off against Monmouth. Monmouth, 3.5 point favorites. Still on this game, 146.5 to 147.5. Did set a total here of a 144.5. I do like the under. We've got a Monmouth team that just doesn't knock down their twos. They're outside the top 275 in terms of their 2-point shot percentage. You've got a Monmouth team that's looking to play relatively slow and controlled. They're about 282nd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. And on the flip side, you've got a Northeastern team that they're neither here nor there with their tempo. They're about 137th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. For Northeastern, they're an okay offensive team. They're actually a top 125 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis away from home, but not a lot of firepower in the backcourt because they are still missing L.A. Pride, who is their top scorer to begin the season. That's been a little bit of a hampering to them. Now, William Kamori has done a nice job stepping up. He's shooting about 46.5% from three, 12 points per contest. Absolutely love what he's able to bring to the table for the team. But for Northeastern, what is plaguing them a little bit is the fact that they are turning the ball over about 12 times per contest, outside the top 175 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, and they may not be able to get great looks inside. While this Monmouth team has been really rough with regards to their 2-point shooting percentage, and Northeastern, by the way, they are outside the top 325 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage as well. For this Monmouth team, they are a top 15 team in terms of block shot rate. You've got a guy in Doc Mortar who stands right around about 7 feet tall. He's been able to give you a block and a half per contest, not a lot of scoring, but contributes there. Jason Rivera Torres, 15.5 points, pair of steals, block and a half per contest. It's a Monmouth team with having just a little bit more well-roundedness than in past years. Last few years, they've had like one feature guy. Now you've got Rivera Torres giving you 15 points per contest. Stefanas Spatalis along with Justin Ray. They combine for about 22 points per contest. Ray shoots 39% from 3-point. Cornelius Robinson, 9 points, shoots 37.5% from 3. And then Jack Collins, 5 assists, 2 steals per contest for a Monmouth team that they themselves have a little bit of an issue taking care of the ball right around about 200th in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. But in a tight spot, this is a Monmouth team that they do shoot over 74% of the free throw line, top 125 mark there. They're about a country average team with their 3-point shooting, and being a team that does a nice job locking down low, I think that that's just enough for them to get the job done. And both of these teams, top 125 teams, in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. So made a total of 144.5. I like the under, and with Monmouth, 1 to 8 to 4 with them. 853, 854. Drexel is on the road against Towson. Towson does find themselves as a 6.5 point favorite. Your total on this game, you're going to be getting it at a 123.5 to a 124.5. And with Towson, I set them as a 7-point favorite. I'm willing to lay up to 6.5. Two of the slowest teams in all of college basketball here. Drexel is 352nd. Towson is 349th. So this has all the makings of a turtle race, and Towson is right now 287th in the country in terms of points per possession. it goes outside the top 300 in their home games. Drexel's been a little bit better in terms of being able to knock down threes. They're up to about 235th in the country in terms of points per possession, and it's a Drexel team that's actually allowing a lot of second and third chances outside the top 125 in terms of defensive rebound percentage. And the one thing that Towson has going for them, they've been a really good offensive rebound team. Top 45 team in terms of percentage of the missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. And when it comes to Drexel, very much as whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Shane Blakeney has been the main guy with about 13 points, 5 boards, 2 on half per contest, shoots 37.5% from 3. But then you've got Josh Reed, Victor Panov, Eli Beard, and Kevin Vanderhorst, all between 8.2 and 9.9 points per contest. Really, nobody outside of Garfield Turner down for what gives you over 5 rebounds per game, but they do a nice job by committee. Drexel's a top 100 team in terms of offensive rebound percentage, and they have been a relatively good team in terms of opponents' percentages. Top 125 team in terms of opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. That said, this is a Towson team that I think is going to be able to have a little bit of success here. You've got some firepower with Tyler Teata, Dylan Williamson, who combined for 30.5 points per contest. Both of these teams in a tight spot are really bad at the free throw line. Towson 69.3% at the charity stripe. Drexel 64%. That is not great to say the least. And for Towson, their games don't involve a lot of free throws, so that's positive. And neither team is really forcing the issue. You've got a Towson team that's well outside the top 250 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. So even in a slower game, you should be able to get clean possessions. But Jack Tombia is able to give you about 5.5 rebounds per game. Tyler Coleman, he's been able to supply about 6 points per contest. I do think that in the end, Towson is going to be able to iron out the fact that they are shooting 28.3% from 3-point. You're a bad 3-point shooting team. I'm convinced that they're a little bit better with their 3-point shooting percentage. I think that it rebounds here, and I do think that the second and third chances get you an over. So semi-total at 127. I like the over, and with Towson, I'm willing to lay up to 6.5 with them. 855, 856 on the card. Columbia is on the road against Yale. Yale's a pretty good size favorite of 8.5 points. 153.5 to 154.5 is at total. And with Yale, I did set them as a favorite of 4 points. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Columbia. Columbia is doing a really good job on the glass, and so is Yale. Yale is about 75th in the country in terms of rebound percentage. Nick Townsend, 15.5 points, over 7 boards, and he shoots nearly 50% from 3-point range. And then Isaac Celisar has been able to give you about 5 rebounds per game as well. Riley Fox has been stepping up. He's been foxy with his double figures. He's able to throw in there some boards as well. But Columbia, 14th in the country in terms of overall rebound percentage, 7th in games played away from home. And it's a Columbia team that they're able to keep up with the Yale 3-point shooting. Yale shooting 40.7% from 3-point range. That is a top 5 mark in all of college basketball. Columbia, they're 29th. They shoot 37.4% from 3-point range. And Kenny Nolan has done a nice job giving this team right around about 14 to 15 points per contest. They've been dealing with the injury to the international man of mystery that comes in from, I believe, Algeria in Zanu Endi Bedri, but Blair Thompson has been able to step up with about 11 points, 5 boards. He's popping it at 47% from 3-point range. Jared O'Keefe is able to shoot 39% from 3-point range, and it's a Yale team that, while they're so good on offense, they're a top 25 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. This is a pretty ghastly team with regards to their defense, and it is a Yale team that they actually fall off a little bit from ranking 9th overall in terms of points per possession when they're at home. They're more around about 13th or 14th in a roadside-neutral venue. As a matter of fact, for Yale, in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis at home, they're outside the top 275 in all of college basketball, but you're not going to get a ton of possessions in this game. Yale's about 293rd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Columbia is 161st, and Columbia has been outside the top 175 in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. They haven't been necessarily amazing there. They're not terrible, though, and they do not allow a lot of good looks on the inside. Top 75 team with that regard. Now, for Columbia, they have had a tough time taking care of the ball. They're outside the top 290 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, which I think is impactful with this total. I set mine at a 152 as a result, so I'm going to be in on the under, but I think that Columbia, with the way that they hit the glass, they hold in there. I'm going to be willing to take the points, set them as an underdog of 4. 857, 858 on the card. Cornell is on the road against Brown. Well, what can Brown do for you? Well, they win this game, all right, they'll certainly make you some money. They're an underdog of 2 to 2.5 points. 163.5 is the total. It's a dangerous game taking unders in Cornell games, but I'm going to take it under. I set my total at a 157.5. This Brown team has actually been quite good on defense. Brown, 74th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Brown not cutting it. 243rd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Cornell is cutting it. Cornell is 12th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. And with this Cornell bunch, they are right now 52nd in the country in terms of points per possession. But if you look at them in a road or neutral court environment, they actually ascend into the top 20. And it's a Cornell bunch that has had a little bit of a tough time with turnovers, a little bit over 12 turnovers per contest. But I mean, this team is just a flamethrower from 3-point range, making 38.7% of their threes, and it's just made crazier by the fact that They have one of the highest three-point rates in all of college basketball. It's not like they're doing this on low volume or anything like that. For Cornell, they are taking about 52.5% of their shots from three, 55.3% of their shots from three in a road/neutral court venue. I do think that this is going to taper off a little bit, though, mainly because the one thing that Brown has going for them is that they are a really good perimeter defense. I know that they've been dealing with a few injuries, and there's been a little bit of up and down with that regard, and this is an offense of Brown, by the way, that is outside the top 275 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis at home. You've had Landon Lewis deal with injuries, but he's back. He's been able to give you about 15.6 rebounds per game, but it's a Brown team that if you involve their games against non-D1 opponents, they're allowing teams to shoot about 29.7% from three-point range. If you take into account only the D1 games, 30.5% from three, which goes down to 27.4% from three-point range at home. So I actually do think that they match up okay in this spot. Now, I did have to set my line at 3.5 because with this Brown team, they're just not really a good offensive team. You've been able to get a little bit of production out of Adreno Odachino, who's been able to give you in his games about 11 points per contest. He's out with a little bit of injury as well, but for Brown, they're about country average with regards to their three-point shooting, and they've been a top 75 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but in a tight spot, they only shoot about 69.5% at the free throw line, and with their just inability to be able to execute in general on offense, I do think that Cornell gets the job done in what is still a high-scoring game, but low-scoring for their standards. Semi-total 157.5. I do like the under, and with Cornell, I'm going to be willing to lay up to 3 with them. 859, 860 on the card. It's Penn. They're on the road against Harvard, and Harvard is a favorite here of 4.5 points. So on this game, it is 148.5, and with Penn, I did set them as an underdog of 2.5 points, so I'm going to be willing to take those points. You've got a Penn bunch that has been able to do a very good job from three-point range. As a collective, they're shooting over 38% from three-point shot, 25 mark. There, you've got Ethan Roberts, who's dealt with injury. He's back giving you about 19.5 points. 3 assists, shoots 44% from 3. Michael Zanoni has been able to shoot about 42% from 3. Cam Thrower shoots 43% from 3. So it's just a lot of guys. TJ Power, a former top 50 recruit of Duke, 15 points, 7.5 boards, but this is a Penn team that they themselves are going to give up a lot on the inside. They are outside the top 300 in terms of their own 2-point shooting percentage, outside the top 275 in terms of their opponent's 2-point shooting percentage, and that's where Harvard has been able to make their hay. And you do have a Penn team that is not really looking to push the same tempo that Frank McCaffrey's Iowa teams did in the past, right around about 177th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Harvard super slow. They're 345th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and Harvard is allowing teams to shoot about 33.7% from 3. That's 173rd. That's about country average. And Harvard, they themselves have not been the world's worst offensive team, not necessarily amazing, 159th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but you've got a lot of guys that have just been around one another. They've got pretty much everyone back from a season ago. Tay Barber, Thomas Beatties, they've been able to combine for about 24 points, 9.5 rebounds per game. Chandler Piggy, 14 points, 4.5 boards, 3.5 assists, and then Robert Hitton, 16.5 points per contest, and with Beatties, he shoots over 52% from 3. Harvard as a whole is shooting about 36.5% from 3. That is a top 75 mark in all of college basketball. With this Harvard team, they're just not going to give you any second and third chances. They're outside the top 300 in terms of offensive rebound percentage. Not bad on the defensive glass. So meanwhile, you got a Penn team that they've been a top 175 team in terms of generating second and third chances. It's not a team that's really going to be forcing the issue in terms of turnovers. So both teams should be able to get some good, clean possessions here, but I do think that things are slowed down a little bit. In the end, I do think that Harvard is able to get the job done, but I can only set my line at a 2.5, despite Harvard being really good at the free throw line. They shoot 79.5% at the free throw line, but bottom 25 team in terms of free throws attempted on a per possession basis. So set a total of 144.5, like the under, and with Harvard, I'm going to be making them a 2.5 point favorite, so won't take the 4.5 that I'm seeing with Penn, 861, 862. It's Sacred Heart. They're going to be on the road against a Rider, and Rider does find themselves as a home underdog here of 3.5 points, and so on this game, 139.5, and I said Sacred Heart is an 8-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay it on a 365 Division I teams. Rider 365th with their 3-point shooting percentage at 25.2%. Rider's actually been a top 250 team in terms of rebound percentage. They have not been the world's worst team on the glass, but they're getting lambasted in the turnover battle. They're outside the top 275 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on offense. Bottom 10 team in terms of generating turnovers on defense, and that's big for a Sacred Heart team that's 307th in the country in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. On offense for Rider, you do have 2 double-figure scorers, Flash Burton, Zion Cruz, that combine for about 25 points per contest. There's quite literally nobody other than Jamar McNeil, who I believe has attempted 2 threes this year, that's shooting above 28.6% from 3-point range. You do have Caleb Smith down low, 7.7 boards per contest. Shamari Fuller, 6.5 points, 6.5 rebounds per game. So these guys have been able to do a pretty rock solid job, but for Sacred Heart, they should be able to win that battle on the glass, as you've been able to get good production out of Anquan Hill, who was dealing with an injury He's back 16.6 boards. And Hill last year shot over 40% from three, down to 28.5% this season. But since he's returned, he's been shooting it a little bit better from the outside. You've got Jan Farrell, who shoots 42.5% from three with about 11.5 points per contest. Sacred Heart as a whole does shoot over 35% from three-point range. And if you could get these guys to the free throw line, they've been really good there. They shoot 78.5% at the free throw line. That is the top 10 mark at all of college basketball. And with this Sacred Heart team, they really give it up from three-point range. They're outside the top 275 in terms of opponent's three-point shooting percentage. They get bludgeoned inside, but again, with this Rider offense, they're just not going to be able to take control because they're just so bad at taking care of the ball, and it's a Rider team that is not playing with any sort of tempo whatsoever. Right now, in terms of total possessions per game, 341st, and Sacred Heart not necessarily gunning at themselves, 222nd in terms of total possessions per game, so they make my line 8. I'm willing to lay with Sacred Heart, and I'm going to be in on the under semi-total at a 136. 863, 864 on the card. Iona, they're on the road against St. Peter's, and the Peacocks find themselves as 3.5 point favorites. 145 to 145.5 is the total. Set a total of 144.5. I do like the under. You're going to have dueling tempos here with Iona. In terms of total possessions per game, they are 84th in all of college basketball, and for St. Peter's, this team is 316th, and St. Peter's all of a sudden has become a really good team in terms of generating turnovers. Now, for St. Peter's, they're also a really good team in terms of guarding the arc. In their home games, teams are shooting just 28.5% from three, and there's not going to be good looks from three because Iona, they themselves have been a good perimeter defense. Right now, they are 39th in the country with teams shooting about 30.2% from three-point range, and when it comes to just this team in St. Peter's and their turnovers forced on a per possession basis, right now they have been one of the best teams in all of college basketball. Iona is about country average, and Iona is getting blown away on the glass. They've been outside the top 275 there. St. Peter's, though, 22.9% of opponents' possessions in their home games have been resulting in a turnover. That is a top 25 mark in all of college basketball. And you've got Brett Bland on the side of St. Peter's. He's been able to do a rock solid job giving this team about 15 points per contest, as St. Peter's not doing a great job of executing on the inside. They're well outside the top 300 in terms of their 2-point shooting percentage, but they've been able to give you a little bit from the outside with Bryant shooting 37.5% from three. This team has been solid at the free throw line at about 75.5% at the charity stripe. You've got also Bryce Eaton, who's been able to give you about 10.5 points per contest. TJ Robinson throws in there about 11 points per game as well. And for St. Peter's, they are a top 75 team in terms of their offensive rebound percentage. It's an Iona team that is giving up a lot of those second and third chances, but you might have the best player out there in the floor, and CJ Anthony comes over from Cincinnati, 14.5 points, 6 assists, shoots 41% from three. Toby Harris shoots 41.5% from three, and Lamine Celebi has been able to supply about 8 rebounds, a little bit under 2 steals per contest. It's an Iona team that I think is going to be able to do a solid job of holding in there. Recognize that St. Peter's in a tight spot. They do a nice job knocking down their free throws, but they just don't hit those interior shots as well. And Iona is a top 50 team in terms of fewest free throws allowed on a per possession basis. So I did set a total here of a 144.5, 145 plus. I am in on the under, and for St. Peter's made them 2.5 point favorites, so 3 plus. I'm going to be willing to take those points as well with Iona. 865, 866 on the card. It is Niagara, and they are going to be playing us to Mount St. Mary's. Mount St. Mary's is a road favorite of 1.5 to 2.5 points. 132.5 is the total. I absolutely hate this Mount St. Mary's team and the way that they turn the ball over, but even I had to set them as a 7.5 point favorite here. I'm going to be willing to lay it. This Niagara team is just absolutely terrible. I wish I could put it any other way, and for this Niagara team, they're actually not the world's worst team at generating turnovers. 181st in the country, but in their home games specifically, they actually fall outside the top 275 with this regard. So a Mount St. Mary's team that has had all sorts of issues taking care of the ball. Right now for Mount St. Mary's, they're 288th in the country in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. Bottom 10 team in terms of taking care of the ball. They should be able to get some clean possessions here, and this is a Niagara team that, because they're so bad on the glass, they're outside the top 350 in terms of offensive rebound percentage. They need to knock down threes. They're 295th in the country, shooting 31.2% from three. Like, this is just absolutely wild for this team, and for Mount St. Mary's, you do have a pretty nice collective of guys that have been able to give you between about 8 to 11.5 points per contest. Main two guys, Trey DeVue along with Arlonda Skis, 11.6 points per contest. They combine to be able to shoot about 35% from three-point range. Love what Xavier Lipscomb is able to bring to the table. 10 points, 5 boards, 4 assists, so he's been rock solid there. You've been able to have Mason So shoot about 34% from three-point range as well, and he chips in there 3 assists per game as well. If you look at conference play and conference play only, it is a Mount St. Mary's team that's actually been a little bit better in terms of generating turnovers, so bit of a credit there. And The team really does a nice job in terms of being able to guard on the inside as well for Mount St. Mary's. Top 100 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, and Niagara is just getting bombed from three. They're outside the top 3 in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, and they actually look to force teams to the outside as well, which that doesn't make any sense. You have absolutely nothing down low for this team. As a matter of fact, for this Niagara bunch, not a single guy gives you over 4 rebounds per game. Josiah Sabino leads the team with 3.9 rebounds per game. You've only got one double-figure scorer. That'd be Justin Page. Shoots 29% from 3, 13 points per contest. And with this Niagara team just being unable to get any sort of offense going whatsoever, bottom 10 team in terms of being able to get to the free throw line, I do think that Mount St. Mary's is able to go out there, get the job done in this spot. I did set my line at a 7.5. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. And for Mount St. Mary's, relatively mid-tempo team in terms of total possessions per game, 172nd. Niagara outside the top 3, but I think that there might be some late game fouling in this one, so I did set a total of 133.5 here at the 132.5. I like the over. 867, 868 on the card. It is Fairfield on the road against Siena. Siena is a 6.5 to a 7.5 point favorite. 143.5 is the total, and I made my total a 138.5. I'm going to be in on the under. You've got a Siena bunch that has really done a nice job in terms of slowing things down. 356th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Fairfield, slow but not uber slow. 241st in terms of total possessions per game. And Fairfield's not necessarily the world's greatest shooting team. Now, from the outside, they're about 179th in terms of their 3-point shooting percentage. Well outside the top 275 in terms of their 2-point shooting percentage. What has made them tick is, for one, taking care of the ball. Top 60 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. And two, they do a really nice job in terms of giving themselves second and third chances. In a roadside shoot square venue, they generate about 34.4% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. That's a top 40 mark in all of college basketball. Meanwhile, you got a Siena team that they themselves have been very good on the glass as well. Right now for Siena, they're 83rd in the country in terms of their offensive rebound percentage. They're a little bit better on the defensive glass than this Fairfield team, and I do love the fact that this Siena bunch has been able to do a really good job in terms of guarding the 3-point line, as well as for Siena, they're a line team who shoot only about 30.9% from 3-point, top 75 mark in all of college basketball. Now, I did have to set my line more at a 6.5, so at a 7+, I'm going to be willing to take those points because I do think that Braden Sparks is going to be able to keep this Fairfield team very lively. He's been their do-it-all sort of guy with about 17 points, 3.5 boards, 2.5 assists, does shoot over 40% from 3, and then download DeCalvon Wolfinger along with Brandon Benjamin. These two guys are combining for about 25.5 points, a combined 13 rebounds per game, so these guys have been very rock solid with that regard. And on the flip side of things, you've got a Siena team that just has not been able to shoot it really well from 3-point range. As a collective, they are shooting less than 30.5% from 3-point range. That's a bottom 35 mark in all of college basketball. Kevin Doty being able to supply 16.7 rebounds per game. You don't have anyone outside of Christian Jones that shoots above 33% from 3, but Siena also doing a great job on the turnover front. Top 75 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, and they're a top 50 team in terms of fewest free throw attempts allowed on a per possession basis, so they've been able to do a rock solid job there. Justice Schultz is able to give you 12.5 points, steal and a half, 5 assists per contest, so like what he brings to the table. Desmond Goodrick being out of the fold has hurt this team, but in the end, I do think that Fairfield is going to be able to in there. Siena in a dip and tuck spot, they shoot about 72.5% the free throw line, little bit suspect there, and like the way that Fairfield executes a little thing, so sub line at 6.5, 7+, we'll take the points with Fairfield, and in on the under sub total at a 138.5, 869, 870 on the card. It is Marist. They play with some Merrimack, and the Merry Men of Merrimack do find themselves as a underdog here of 5.5 to 6.5 points. 134.5 is the total, and for Merrimack, I did set them as a underdog here of 8.5 points, so I'm going to be willing to lay with Marist. You've got a Merrimack team that, by the way, is one of the slowest teams once again in terms of total possessions per game. They are down to 353rd in the country. Marist a little bit faster than in past years, but still a pretty slow and controlled team, 267th in terms of total possessions per game, and Marist is doing a great job locking down from 3. Third in the country in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage overall, and teams against them shoot 23% from 3-point range, and Marist is going to have a nice advantage on the glass. Not that Marist is necessarily a great rebounding team, but at the same time, they're facing up against a Merrimack team that is outside the top 355 in terms of their rebound percentage. You have a Merrimack team that has always been pretty solid in terms of generating turnovers, but not quite as great this year, 65th in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. It's actually Marist who's been better with this regard. Marist is 14th in the country in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. Now, what you do have going for you for Merrimack is you do have two go-to scorers. KVR Kennedy has supplied the team with 16.5 points, 4.5 boards per contest, and then Ernest Shelton, he throws in there 15.5 points per game, and Kennedy and Shelton do combine to shoot over 37% from 3-point range, but the rest of the team is shooting really, really bad. You don't have anyone else on the team that shoots above 31.5% from the outside, and nobody on this Merrimack team gives you over 4.4 rebounds per game, though you do have Okwazi, who's been able to give you about 1.9 blocks per contest, and flip side for this Marist team, it's really a whole greater than some of its parts collective. Now, Justin Bernard has been that main facilitator for the team, about 10.5 points, 3.5 assists per contest. Rajon Blackwell along with Elijah Lewis. I like what these guys have been able to bring to the table. They're both supplying between 12 and 13 points per contest. With Blackwell, he shoots 34% from 3 points. For Marist, not a team that's going to blow you away on offense or outside the top 200 with regards to their 3-point shooting percentage. They're a country average shooting with their 2-point shooting percentage. But if you do find yourself in a spot where you need them to knock down free throws, they as a collective shoot over 78% at the free throw line. That is a top 10 mark in all of college basketball. So that gives you a little bit of confidence of being able to lay this number. You've got a Merrimack team that's going to get completely blown away on the glass. So it is a circumstance where I'm going to be willing to lay the number in this spot with Marist. I did set them as a favorite of 8.5 points, and I think that this is going to be a slog of the game. Set my total at a 126.5. I'm in on the under. 871, 872 on the card. It's Manhattan. They're going to be on the road against Quinnipiac. Quinnipiac is a 12.5 to a 13-point favorite, and your total's between 153.5 to a 154.5. And with Manhattan, I did have to set them as a sizable underdog here of 11 points, but I think we've gone a little bit too far with 12 plus. I'm going to be willing to take those points. Now for Manhattan, this has been a ghastly team on defense. Their defensive rebound percentage is 358th. They're allowing opponents to grab 37.7% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. Meanwhile, for Quinnipiac, they're allowing a lot of second chances as well. They're 321st in the country in terms of defense rebound percentage. Now Quinnipiac, a much better 3-point shooting percentage defense, a team that has been a little bit more stout inside. With Quinnipiac right now 114th in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and for Manhattan it's a ghastly 340th. But you also do have a Manhattan team that has been a top 125 team in terms of taking care of the ball, and you do have firepower in the backcourt. They've been badly missing Will Sidner this year, but that said, you've got Devin Dinkins, who's been able to give you 12.5 points, 2.5 assists from 3-point. He shoots 35.5%. Jaden Winston shoots 36% from 3 with about 15 points per game. And then Frazier Knight at the Roxborough has been able to throw in there about 6 boards, 11.5 points per contest. And this Manhattan team, if they can find a way to get to the free throw line, they shoot 78.5% at the free throw line. That is a top 15 mark in all of college basketball. Meanwhile, for Quinnipiac, this unit has been one that has been very good in terms of keeping teams off the free throw line, and they're a top 75 team with their 3-point shooting percentage at around 36%. Asim Jones continues to shoot 62% from 3. Absolutely remarkable there. 11.5 points per contest. They were missing Jaden Zimmerman for a time. He missed like 6 or so games, but he's back for this team, and he's been able to score 19 plus points in 4 of the team's last 5 games that he has played in, so he's just going to be all good to go here. And then Amari Monroe doing a bit of everything, a block, 2.5 steals, 15 points, so I love what he's able to bring to the table. But that's it for this Manhattan team. I do think that they're going to be able to do just enough to hold in this game. It's going to be probably a relatively mid-tempo game for this Manhattan team in terms of total possessions per game. They check in 188th in all of college basketball. Quinnipiac, they're more around about 134th, and while Quinnipiac should be able to do a nice job controlling this game with regards to their defense, this is a team that they do allow those second and third chances, and for Quinnipiac, they are outside the top 275 in terms of their own 2-point shooting percentage, which I think is just enough for Manhattan to remain lively here. I did set a total of 153, so you're at a 153.5, 154. I'm in on the under, and I'm going to be willing to take 12 plus here with Manhattan. 873, 874 on the card. You've got VCU playing host to St. Joe. St. Joe's hopes to not be average Joes, as currently they are 14.5 to 15.5 point underdogs. 152.5 to 153.5 is the total line. I did set my line at 15.5. I'm going to be willing to lay the 14.5 with VCU. This squad has been a whole greater than the sum of its parts sort of team. You don't necessarily have that one guy that's really just going to take over a game, but they do now have Terrence Hill, who's been able to really headline things with 14.5 points, 2.5 assists, shoots 41% from 3, and VCU just as a whole, they've shot it well from 3, 36.6%. That's a top 60 mark in all of college basketball, and they're a top 35 team in terms of free throws attempted on a per possession basis. It is a unit that has been a little bit on cold on defense, about 100th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but you've also got a St. Joe's team that has been leaving a lot to be desired with their outside shooting. Right now, they are shooting less than 30% as a collective, and it's outside the top 340 in all of college basketball for a team that is not necessarily the world's worst on defense. They check in on 141st in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and it's a mid-tempo team, about 184th in terms of total possessions per game. VCU, they're looking to crank it up a little bit more under Phil Martelli Jr. They're up to about 98th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, so I'm going to be in on the over, despite the fact that the St. Joe's team, if they do have a forte, it's really being able to defend down low. You've got a bunch that is in the top 55 in terms of block shot percentage. Justice Ajabor has been able to supply 2+ blocks per contest, and even though St. Joe's does not necessarily shoot it really well from 3-point range, you do have guys guys, they're able to contribute. Deuce Jones being out, he was their top scorer. He decided to leave the program with about 16 points per contest as hurt, but Jane Glover in the interim has been able to take over with about 16 points per game. You do have Glover being able to shoot about 38.5% from 3-point, and then Austin Wolford has been a nice find for the team as well, shooting about 35.5% from 3. You do have someone like an Anthony Finke who's able to give you 4 boards, Cesar Haskins up to about 6.5 rebounds per game, but just this collective of VCU that isn't generating turnovers the way that they have in past seasons, but still has been able to do a nice job in terms of putting teams under duress, being a top 125 team in terms of both their own 2-point shooting percentage and opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. And then you've got someone like a Barry Evans who's able to give you 5 boards, pair of assists, steal per contest. Laser Djokovic stands right around about 6'11", mid-30s point shooter. I do think that VCU finds a way to get the job done, and I do think that St. Joe's is starting to improve themselves a little bit with regards to their 3-point shooting. You take a look at them in conference play, it's not amazing, but they're up more around about 30% from 3 compared to less than 28% in non-conference play. So did set a total here of a 155.5. I like the over, and I'm willing to lay up to 15 here with VCU. 875, 876 on the card. It is George Washington. They're going to be on the road against George Mason in the Battle of George. George Mason is a 3.5 to 2.5 point favorite. On this game, 154.5. Did set a total here of a 151. I like the under. I recognize that George Mason has had a few wobbly performances recently on defense, but this is still a team that likes to slow things down. 321st in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Now, George Washington has been a little bit more of an up-tempo team. They're up to about 91st in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and with this George Mason team, they're still a top 100 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Right now, they're checking in more in that pocket of about 63rd in the country, and they are giving up about 10 points more per 100 possessions away from home rather than at home. And George Washington thought that they'd be a little bit better on defense. Right now, they're about 121st in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and that's a big reason why I did make this number 3. With this number being between 2.5 and 3.5, I would rather take 3.5 with George Washington rather than lay 2.5 with George Mason, even though this is a George Mason team that if they do find themselves in a pressure spot, this is just a really good shooting team in general. They bring in a guy that I really like for Presbyterian who's been able to supply about 16.5 points per contest. Corey Mincy that shoots 42.5% from 3. They shoot 74% at the free throw line, and then you've had Jahari Long, the Maryland transfer, shoot about 42.5% from 3, 11.5 points per game. Riley Allen Patch, he supplies about 5.5 rebounds per game. And on the other side of things, you've got a George Washington team that it's been a case where they've been very strong down low. I like what you've been able to get out of Rafael Castro, 16.5 points, 8.5 rebounds per game. Now, George Mason is a top 75 team in terms of rebound percentage, but George Washington is an even better rebounding team, so I do think that that keeps them lively. And for George Washington, we talked about it with our good friend Rocco Miller. They're a team that does rank in the top 40 in terms of their overall just shooting percentages, in terms of 2-point shooting percentage, 3-point shooting percentage, more around about 50th. They do have a little bit of kryptonite with turnovers. They're outside the top 175 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, but they also generate turnovers. They've been a top 125 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. Biggest weakness is down low outside the top 200 with regards to opponent's 2-point shooting percentage, but Garrett Johnson, 13.5 points, 4.5 rebounds per game. Tyrone Marshall throws in their 5 rebounds per game, and then Trey Autry and Trey Dinkins, Trey squared, has been able to combine for 22 points, about 41.5% 3-point shooting. I do think that things slow down a little bit. I do think that George Washington is starting to find their swagger a little bit more on defense, so semi line at 3 at a 3.5 plus. Won't take those points with George Washington. In on the under, semi total at a 151. 877, 878 on the card. It's Providence. They are going to be on the road against Marquette. Marquette finds themselves as a 1 to 1.5 point favorite. 166 to 165.5 is the total, and I said Marquette as a 1.5 point favorite. I'm actually going to be willing to lay the number mainly because this is a Providence defense and it's not great to say the least. Providence 252nd in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and it's a Marquette team that has been ghastly themselves, 176th in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but Marquette has given up 19.3 points fewer per 100 possessions when they're at home rather than at a roadside score venue. So a top 100 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. They just flat out can't shoot it from 3. This team is shooting 30.7% from 3. That's outside the top 300 in all of college basketball, and for Providence, they've actually been a top 75 team in terms of opponent's 2-point shooting percentage. You're getting cooked from 3-point range. Marquette is getting cooked from 3. They're outside the top 225 with our regard, but Chase Ross about 4.5 boards, 3.5 assists, 15.5 points per game. Like what he brings to the table. Nigel James is like the only other top 4 scorers right now that shoots above 28% from 3-point range, 39% 3-point shooter, and he's been able to step up a little bit for the team. But Marquette, top 125 team in terms of offensive rebound percentage. Ben Gold has been able to give you 8 points, 6 rebounds per game, but on the flip side, you do have a Marquette team that has to go up against Oswin. I can't pronounce his last name, but Oswin, he's been able to do a nice job with about 2.5 blocks, 7.5 points, 7.5 rebounds per game, going to be the main dominator down low in this game, but nobody else for Providence gives you over 5 rebounds per game. Corey Floyd has been hit or miss with 9 points, 4.5 boards. They shoot about 37.5% from 3, and Providence as a whole, they shoot 34.8% from 3, a little bit above country average. They've been a top 75 team in terms of their 2-point shooting percentage, and they take good care of the ball, but Providence also hovering right around about 300th in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. If this comes down to late game fouls, Providence has been shooting about 77% at the free throw line, and I do like this total over because you've got two teams that are really not cranking down their tempo. For Providence, they are right now in terms of total possessions per game, number 6 in all of college basketball. Marquette is 73rd, so I think they get plenty of possessions at a tight spot, but I do think that Marquette at home, they do just enough to be able to find a way to be able to get the job done in this spot. Set them as a 1.5 point favorite, 1 to lay up to 1 with Marquette, and I like the over. 879, 880 on the card. You've got Princeton. They're going to be on the road against Dartmouth, and Dartmouth does find themselves as a 1 to 1.5 point favorite total on this game. It is 144.5 to 145.5, and with Dartmouth, I set them as a favorite of 6 points, so I'm going to be willing to lay the number. It's a Dartmouth team that has actually been able to do a pretty solid job in terms of being able to guard the 3-point line, while they themselves have been one of the better 3-point shooting teams in all of college basketball. Dartmouth is right now shooting about 38.7% from 3-point range, 15th in all of college basketball. That actually goes down to like 32.8% when they're at home. And for Princeton, they take a ton of threes. They are shooting overall 33.3% from 3-point range. That goes down to 31.2% away from home. And 49.4% of their attempts in a roadside shoot score venue are from 3-point range, 22nd highest in all of college basketball. But Dartmouth, they're 45th in opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. Teams are shooting just 30.4% from 3 against them. And it is a Princeton unit that is out getting fully healthy, as they were dealing with an injury to their top scorer, Dalen Davis, for like 7 or 8 games or something like that. When he's been healthy, he's been able to spy about 16.5 points per contest, mid 33-point shooter. And then you got Jackson Hickey along Jack Stanton. These two guys combined for about 26 points per contest. Hickey has been able to shoot 43% from 3-point. They combined to be able to give you about 9 rebounds per game. And for Princeton, they're pretty solid in terms of taking care of the ball. Country average in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, but the kryptonite for Dartmouth, they are outside the top 275 in terms of ball security. They turn the ball over darn near 13 times per contest. Princeton is outside the top 310 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. Now, for Princeton, they've also been a top 150 team in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, so the attempts are going to be rather limited, and you do have a bunch in Princeton that has been playing at one of the slower paces that you're going to find in all of college basketball. In terms of possessions per game, Princeton is right now 311th in all of college basketball. Dartmouth, they're not necessarily pumping up the tempo, but at the same time, they're a mid-tempo team. They're about 139th in terms of total possessions per game. Dartmouth is about 238th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but they should be able to dominate things down low. You've got Brandon Mitchell-Day, who's been able to give you over 6.5 rebounds per game, and he's been able to do a rock solid job giving the team 13.5 points per contest, and they've just went into flamethrower mode with their top guy, Kareem Thomas, shooting 52% from 3, 18 points per contest, but Connor Admison, Jaden Williams, they combine for about 22.5 points per contest. Williams is able to shoot 38.5% from 3-point range, and Dartmouth, pretty solid in terms of being able to just control the boards. They've been a top 225 team with regards to rebound percentage. Princeton has been getting dominated with that regard. They're not grabbing any sort of second and third chances, so it's a bit of an interesting circumstance here. With Dartmouth, I did set them as a 6-point favorite with the way that they do such a good job around the perimeter, so at a 144.5 or higher, in on the under, and I'm willing to lay with Dartmouth. 881, 882. It's Montana State. They're going to be on the road against Northern Colorado. Northern Colorado is a 2.5 point favorite, and your total on this game, it is between 155 to 155.5. So Northern Colorado is a 4-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. It's a Montana State team that has been pretty solid in terms of their defense. They're a top 210 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis in a roadside shoot score venue, top 175. And for Northern Colorado, they just do a great job in terms of not allowing second and third chances. Top 35 unit in terms of defensive rebound percentage, but they don't generate a lot of turnovers. They at home are outside the top 285 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but that's it for this Northern Colorado team. They just do a really good job in terms of executing their stuff on offense. You've got a guy in Brock Wisney who at 6'9" has good versatility, 16 points per contest, shoots about 40% from 3. Zach Block continues to shoot 47% from 3 with 13 points per game, and then Quinn Danker, 6.9 assists at 2.5 turnovers per game, 18 points per contest. It is a Northern Colorado team that is very much going to be looking to crank up their tempo in terms of total possessions per game, 53rd in all of college basketball. Montana State is looking to slow it down a little bit more at about 254th, and with Montana State, they're helped out by the fact that they're really not seeking out a lot of second and third chances, so that's something that is going to be able to help them out in this game. And for Montana State, they're a team that's about country average with their 3-point shooting at 33.8%. They're very much built around the backcourt, as you've been able to have quite a few guys be able to step up, like a Jed Miller and Patrick McMahon. These two guys combined for about 27.5 points per contest, and Miller shoots 41% from 3-point. Davion Brown, 41.5% 3-point shooter. The ancillary guys don't necessarily shoot it well from 3, and Miller is a lone guy on the roster that gives you over 5 rebounds per game for Montana State. This team has been pretty solid in terms of guarding the arc, top 150 team in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, but while Northern Colorado is a team that is very content to go bombs away from 3-point, they hurt you on the inside. They're a top 35 team in terms of their 2-point shooting percentage, and in a tight spot, this team shoots 75.9% at the free throw line. That is a top 60 mark in all of college basketball. I do think that that's going to be just enough to be able to get the job done, and they're looking to really push teams inside. For this Northern Colorado team, they're a top 40 team in terms of percentage of opponent shots that come from inside the 3-point line. It is a Montana State team that they themselves have been shooting about 57% from inside the 3-point line. I do think that this is going to be a tight game. In the end, I do think that Northern Colorado a little bit better on the glass to be able to get it done. Set a total here of a 152. I do think that Montana State slows this game down successfully, so I'm in on the under, and I'm willing to lay up to 3.5 with Northern Colorado. 883, 884. It is Montana. The Grizzlies on the road against Northern Arizona. The Lumberjacks are a home underdog of 4 to 4.5 points. 144 to a 145 is the total. And with Montana, I did set them as a favorite of 5 points. I'm willing to lay up to 4.5 with them. Now for Montana, 335th in the country in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. This is also a team that shoots it really well from 3-point range. 37.4% in a roadside short score venue. Top 45 team in all of college basketball. Northern Arizona is quite improved with their 3-point shooting as well. They're a top 155 team now. They shoot 34.4% from 3-point range, but last year this team was really good in terms of not allowing second and third chances with Carson Tout down low. Northern Arizona now down to 289th in the country in terms of defensive rebound percentage. Teams are grabbing well above 30% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound, and for Northern Arizona, it's a unit that is country average in terms of generating turnovers. Not great, not terrible. Zach Davidson has been able to give you about 14 points, 5 boards, but doesn't really pop it from 3. The answer guys have been solid though. Isaiah Shaw and Arnie Ojanik have been able combined to shoot about 43% from 3-point between the two of them. You get 18.3 points per contest. Ryan Abelman, he's been able to give you about 11 points, 5.5 rebounds per game, and then you've been able to have some of these ancillary guys like Kayvon Bradford step up with about 5.5 points per assists per contest. Northern Arizona, not bad at taking care of the ball. Country average team there, but they're not giving themselves any sort of second and third chances, and while Montana's not necessarily one of those teams that's going to pull in there a bunch of offensive rebounds themselves, what they do a good job of is being able to execute inside. They're a top 45 team in terms of their 2-point shooting percentage with Money Williams, giving you about 19.5 points, 4.5 boards, 5.5 assists per contest, and then you've been able to get about 3.3 assists per game as well out of Tyler Isaac, who's been able to throw in there 8 points per game. Tyler Thompson shoots 41% from the outside. It's a Montana team, but which our offense has really done a nice job of traveling, and in a tight spot, the team shoots 77.6% at the free throw line. I do think that you're going to get enough possessions for the over, despite Northern Arizona being about 305th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. As Montana, they bump it up. Montana currently 60th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, made a total of 149. I'm in on the over, and with Montana, I'm going to be willing to lay up to 4.5 with them. This is the last game on the normal Las Vegas betting board before we hit the extra games. 885, 886. Hampton is going to be playing us in North Carolina A&T. A&T is a underdog of 5.5 points. 142.5 to 143.5 is a total for Hampton. I set them as a favorite of 7.5 points, so I'm going to be willing to lay the number. North Carolina A&T is actually a top 150 team in terms of rebound percentage. They've been able to do a pretty solid job there. They'll allow some open looks from 3-point range, but they are allowing teams to only grab about 24.3% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. That's actually 30th in the country, and Hampton at home is allowing teams to be able to pull in their 34.8% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. That is actually outside the top 300 in all of college basketball, but what this Hampton team does a little bit of a better job of is being able to guard on the inside. This team has been a top 250 team in terms of opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage, and North Carolina A&T, they are allowing quite a bit from the outside the top 300 in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. To their credit, they're only about 113th in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, so they've been able to do a solid job there. They're just not flowing clean possessions right now, though. For North Carolina A&T, they're 202nd in the country in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, while Hampton is not necessarily the most amazing team here at 379th. I do think that the backcourt is a little bit better, and for Hampton, what I think is going to be the key is having Xavier Long out there. He's been a double-double machine for them all season long, 9.8 points, 10.6 boards. He throws in there a pair of assists per contest, and then out there with Michael Ely along Jaquel Gaines-White. These guys have been able to combine for about 24 points per game. Hampton, one of the worst 3-point shooting teams in all of college basketball. They shoot 28.3% from 3-point range. That is a bottom 15 mark in all of college basketball, but they really cut you off from being able to hit your threes as well. For Hampton, about a country average team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and this has been a Hampton team that has been able to do a good job in terms of hauling in their second and third chances. In terms of their offensive rebound percentage, this team is in the top 100 in all of college basketball. +1 for North Carolina A&T. While they prevent teams from being able to grab second and third chances, they're just a notch below that. Hampton is actually 96th in terms of offensive rebound percentage. North Carolina A&T, they're more around about 97th, but for North Carolina A&T, they've also been dealing with an injury to their number 2 scorer. That would be one Mr. Luron Walker. You've got 2 Walkers. Lewis Walker is right now the healthy top scorer. He's been able to supply 18.5 points per contest, shoots 31% from 30. Luron, he was giving the team 16.5 points per contest. We haven't seen him in the last 11 games, so that's been an issue, and that means as Zamku Welche Ume, along with Trent Middleton, they've combined for about 22.5 points per contest. They've needed to step up a little bit, and Bryson Ogletree does shoot about 38% from 3-point, but very much an ancillary guy that's not giving you a ton there for A&T. They're outside the top 3 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, while they don't take care of the ball themselves, so even though they've been a nice team on the glass, that's been an issue, and they're also outside the top 340 in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. I do think that for A&T, with them just not being able to execute around the outside, that Hampton in their home environment does find a way to be able to get the job done, and if Hampton does need to knock down their free throws late in the game, they do shoot about 71.5% of the free throw line, just a hair below country average, so I'm going to be willing to take a shot on the under, semi total 141.5, and with Hampton willing to lay up to 7 with them. Now we get the extra games.
The normal betting board picks are complete, but there are some extra games today, so we go into the bonus.
306-501, 306-502. It's St. Francis of Pennsylvania, and they are playing host to Stonehill. Stonehill is a road favorite of 1.5 to 2.5 points. 141.5 is the total. I said my total of 143.5. I do like the over. You had a Stonehill team that's getting absolutely dominated in terms of turnovers. They're outside the top 275 in terms of ball security, turnovers on a per possession basis on offense, outside the top 300 in terms of generating turnovers on a per possession basis on defense. A little bit of a slower team, 233rd in terms of total possessions per game. St. Francis, Pennsylvania has really bumped up their tempo. They're now about 122nd in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and they are not going to give themselves any sort of second and third chances. 325th in terms of offensive rebound percentage. Stonehill, they are actually relatively okay in terms of being able to pull those in, 192nd, but I did set St. Francis as the favorite. I'm going to be willing to take a shot on them on the money line. As for Stonehill, this has not been the same offense ever since Will Batchelor, the transfer from Holy Cross, got injured. He was averaging 10 points per contest. Now, Devontae Hackett, Herman Coffey, these 2 guys combined for 26 points per contest. Coffey has been able to shoot 41.5% from 3-point range, and then we got Rex Sutherland, who's been able to give you about 3.5 assists, 5 points per contest. Raymond Espinal Guzman has been able to give you about 7 points per contest. Redivin Tufdik, hopefully I got that correct, he's been able to give you about 8.8 rebounds per game as well. But on the flip side, you've got a bunch that is going to be able to have Sky Wicks just go off in this game for St. Francis. He's been able to do a nice job, give you about 18 plus points per contest. Not necessarily the world's greatest 3-point shooter, but still he's going to be able to uplift the team just a little bit. And then you've additionally been able to have the transfer from Niagara and Zion Russell be able to supply about 11.5 points, 4 boards, 3 assists per contest. And St. Francis has been a top 175 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. Now they do not execute down low. They're outside the top 3 in terms of their own 2-point shooting percentage and opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, but you've been able to get quite a bit out of Ahmad Harrison recently, 8.5 points. He's now shooting about 40% from 3-point. If you look at conference play for St. Francis, they've been giving up about 80 points per contest, but now they're giving themselves 73 plus points per contest. I do think that they're really going to be looking to crank up the tempo. They both allow a lot of 3-point shots, and they themselves in conference play are shooting 37.5% from 3-point. So I do think that you get an expose of scoring, but in the end, I do think that with the way that Stonehill is getting dominated on the turnover side, St. Francis finds a way to get the job done at home. Made St. Francis the 1.5 point favorite. I like them on the money line. I like the over semi-total at a 143.5. 306-503, 306-504. It is Vermont. They're going to be on the road against Albany. Albany is a home underdog of 5.5 points on this game, 139.5 to 141.5. And for Vermont, I did set them as a favorite of only 3.5 points. So I'm going to be willing to take the points. This is a Vermont team that they do a really good job in terms of not allowing second and third chances. They themselves 303rd in the country in terms of their offensive rebound percentage. So that's a bit of an issue. Albany, meanwhile, at home, they do pull in about 35.5% of their misses as an offensive rebound. That is a top 100 mark in all of college basketball. And for Vermont, this is a defense that has just really taken a big step back from past seasons, as right now they are getting cooked on the inside, outside the top 1 to 85 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, and they really allow a lot of good looks from 3-point range outside the top 225 with that regard. And this is an Albany team that has had a little bit of a tough time in terms of turnovers. They face off against a Vermont team that's well outside the top 225 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. And for Albany, I like what Amir Lindsey brings to the table. 17.5 points, shoots 36.5% from 3-point range. It is an Albany team that has been a top 125 team in terms of their 2-point shooting percentage, leaves something to be desired from the outside. And they've been a country average 3-point shooting defense. They do allow a little bit more on the inside, and Gus Yalden for Vermont has been very rock solid. He's been able to give this team right around about 17 points, 5 boards, and the TJ Long, TJ Hurley, they've been able to combine for about 27 points per game. They combine to shoot about 35% from three-point range. But that said, this is also a Vermont team that's going to be, once again, looking to play super slow and super controlled. In terms of total possessions per game, 342nd in all of college basketball. Albany is by no means like a blazer, but they're about 257th in the country. In terms of total possessions per game, I do think that you're going to get some relatively good execution on offense. I do think that this is coming down to late game fouls, and for Vermont, they shoot about 74% at the free throw line. Albany, they shoot 63.7% at the free throw line. So while Albany has a chance to be able to pull this one out, I just can't set them as a favorite because of that free throw shooting percentage, but being able to catch 5.5 like they're doing here, I'm willing to get there, as I did set Albany as a 3.5 point underdog, and I do think that this is going to be a game with good offensive execution. Set my total at a 141.5, so seeing that 139.5, I like the over, and I'm willing to take the 5+ here with Albany. 306-505, 306-506. Central Connecticut is going to be on the road facing off against Mercyhurst, and Mercyhurst is a home underdog of 1.5 points, 134.5 to 135.5 is the total. Made a total of a 132. I'm in on the under. Now, Central Connecticut has fallen off with their defense quite a bit. They're outside the top 225 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but they're playing super slow and controlled. 303rd in terms of total possessions per game. Mercyhurst 350th, and this Mercyhurst team is going to allow some second and third chances. 243rd in terms of defensive rebound percentage. Central Connecticut 279th, and this Central Connecticut team just has been a really good three-point shooting team. Right now for Central Connecticut, they are 19th in the country, shooting about 38.2% from three-point. Mercyhurst 342nd, and I do think that Central Connecticut finds a way to pull this one out around the outside. I did set them as a 2-point favorite, and for Mercyhurst, this has been a top 100 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. You've got some guys who have been able to give you some versatility, like Mike Kylos Ivanowskis, who's been able to give you 9 points, 5.5 boards, and he's overall for his career shot okay from three. This year below 30%, but Bernie Blunt, Jake Lulleman, they combine for about 27.5 points per game. They combine to shoot about 36% from three, and both do shoot over 85% of the free throw line. Nobody else on the roster shoots above 72% of the free throw line, as Mercyhurst, they are currently outside the top 335 in terms of their free throw shooting percentage. That's going to be big in this game, as Central Connecticut in more of a pressure spot. They shoot 74.5% at the free throw line, and for Central Connecticut, Darren Smith Jr., 21 points, 87% free throw shooter, 39% is what he shoots from three, and then you've got Jay Rogers, who gives you 7.5 assists to 2.5 turnovers per game for the Central Connecticut team, top 75 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis on offense, outside the top 320 in terms of generating turnovers on a per possession basis on defense, but they also keep you off the free throw line. Top 25 team in terms of allowing free throw attempts on a per possession basis, top 150 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. I do think that this is going to be a rather nip and tuck spot. I think that you get good execution, but I also think that you're going to get a slog of a game here as well, and I do think that Central Connecticut, finding that swagger a little bit more on defense is going to be helpful, and I do think that they're going to be able to do so here. I set my line at 2, so I'm willing to lay 1.5 with Central Connecticut. In on the under, I made my total a 132. 306-507, 306-508. Wagner is on the road against Fairleigh Dickinson. Fairleigh Dickinson 1.5 point favorite, so 1.5 point underdogs. Depends upon your book as who's the favorite. 139 after 140.5 is the total, and Wagner, I said, is a 3.5 point favorite. Most books have Wagner as a small underdog. I'm just going to be one to take them outright on the money line. It is a Wagner team that has sped themselves up from past seasons. Right now, in terms of total possessions per game, it doesn't sound like a ton, but Wagner is right now checking in more in that neighborhood of about 268. Typically, they are well outside the top 325, and it's a Wagner team that's shooting 39.4% from three-point range, including 40.5% in a roadside shoot record venue. That is a top 10 mark in all of college basketball. Meanwhile, for Fairleigh Dickinson, this used to be a team that was really built around their guard play and great three-point shooting. 339th in three-point shooting percentage, including 26.1% at home. That has not been great, to say the least. Now, for Fairleigh Dickinson, you do have a little bit more size than you've had in past seasons, as Surreal Martinoff is a true 7-footer. He's come in, he's been able to give the team right around about 8.5 points, 5.5 rebounds per game, and then Eric Parnell, Joey Niesman, they combine to be able to give you about 23 points per contest. Niesman, 3.5 assists, 3.5 boards per contest. So these guys have been relatively rock solid, but in this team, despite the fact that now they're building themselves on the inside, and this has become a top 225 team in terms of rebound percentage. Wagner is getting absolutely cooked there, despite the fact that Xavier Finch is able to give you about 5.5 rebounds per game. They are a group that is still outside the top 300 with their own 2-point shooting percentage, outside the top 275 in terms of opponent's 2-point shooting percentage, and for Wagner, I do think that they're going to do a solid job on the inside, despite the fact that you don't necessarily have the world's greatest rebounding, as you've been able to have about 5 rebounds and 9 points per game out of Benil Bays Basel. Additionally, Nick Jones has been the main scorer for the team, 14.5 points, 3.5 boards, 2.5 assists. He only shoots about 31.5% from three, but Basel shoots 44% from three. Xavier Finn shoots 41% from three. John Awake has been able to shoot 38% from three-point. Just dealt with a little bit of injury, but should be good to go here. I do think that Wagner finds a way to be able to get the job done here, and Wagner has been a top 125 team in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage themselves. So I did some line at 3.5. I'm willing to take Wagner here on the money line. Somebody told 141.5. I do think that Fairleigh Dickinson get to find a little bit more three-point shooting here, and I think that you get some late game fouls, so also in on the over. 36.509, 36.510. Bryant is on the road against NJIT. NJIT is between a 1.5 point favorite to a 1.5 point underdog. 132.5 to 133.5 is the total. And for NJIT, I did set them as the favorite of 2 points. I'm going to be willing to lay the 1.5. I just can't trust in this Bryant offense. They are 350th in the country in terms of three-point shooting percentage, which falls to 25.4% away from them. 304th in the country in terms of offensive rebound percentage, and they don't even hit their twos. They're 288th in the country in terms of two-point shooting percentage away from them. That's well outside the top 300, and it's just frustrating with this Bryant team with the way that they have just been getting cooked in the turnover battle. In terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on offense, outside the top 330, they're outside the top 300 in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, and Timothy Radulski is actually a really nice player. Pair of assists, 12.5 points, 5 boards, shoots 37.5% from three. There's just nothing around him, though. Aaron Davis gives you like 9 points per contest. Quincy Allen, 10 points, 4.5 boards, steal and a half, block and a half per contest, but pretty much everyone not named Aaron Davis just cannot shoot on this team. And on the flip side, you got an NJIT team that it's been rough, but Sebastian Robinson, their top scorer from the season ago, he was dealing with injury to begin the season. It's been a little bit wobbly from. It does feel like he's been able to find a little bit more of his peak form here in conference play. In conference play, he's been able to give the team 18.5 points, still not shooting it well from three. NJIT as a whole, they shoot just 30.5% from three-point range. That's outside the top 300 on all of college basketball. They are awful on the inside as well. This NJIT team is outside the top 325 in terms of rebound percentage. This despite the fact that Ari Fulton has been able to give you about 11.6 rebounds per contest. Melvin Akong Boley missed the first 12 games of the season. Getting him back, he's a Kansas City transfer. He's been able to give you about 6.5 rebounds per game. That elevates the team. Jordan Rogers has been able to give you 5 boards. So I actually think that this team is better on the glass than what their raw metrics would indicate. It is an NJIT team that in a tight spot. Their country average with regards to their free throw shooting percentage, not too bad. They've been outside the top 275 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, and I don't think that you can expect a lot of possessions in this game. NJIT country average team about 200th in terms of total possessions per game. Bryant is 322nd, so I think that this game is stuck in the mud, but NJIT in the end finds a way to get the job done. Semi-total at a 132. I'm in on the under, and for NJIT, willing to lay up to 1.5 with them. 3-6-5-11, 3-6-5-12. Maine is going to be playing with New Hampshire. New Hampshire an underdog of 1.5 points. 128.5 to 130.5 is the total, and for New Hampshire, I did set them as a 3-point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to take a shot on them outright on the money line. These are two teams that are getting absolutely nothing generated on offense. This Maine team, in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, is right now a nice hearty 362nd, and New Hampshire is 348th. But Maine, they shoot 57.1% at the free throw line at home. Out of 365 Division I teams, that is 365th. Now, Maine is a top 75 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, outside the top 300 in terms of taking care of the ball themselves, though. And for this bunch in New Hampshire, you've been able to get quite a bit of production out of both Keyshawn Robinson along with Jack Graham, who have been able to combine for about 23.5 points per contest. Graham is shooting 34% from three-point range, and when it comes to the low post play, you've got Bilal El-Shakiri, who's been able to spy about 7.5 rebounds per game. He's one of just 2 guys on the roster that gives you over 4.3 rebounds per game, but for Maine, they just don't have anything down low whatsoever. They're outside the top 350 in terms of offensive rebound percentage. They have 1 guy on the roster that gives you over 5 rebounds per game. TJ Beal, 12.5 points, 5 rebounds per contest. Really, nobody else has been able to give you over 4.3 rebounds per game, and I mean, for Beal, he shoots 35.5% from 3. He just haven't gotten as much out of ace flag as the team was hoping for. He's been supplying about 4.5 points, 4 boards. He is clearly no Cooper Flag at this point, but that said, you've been able to get a little bit of 3-point shooting out of Logan Carey. Shoots 40% from 3, 7.5 points per contest, but no clean possessions in this game for either Maine or their opponents. I think that this game is going to be very much stuck in the mud, and I do think that in the end, New Hampshire just a little bit better down low, and, well, they actually hit a few free throws, so I sided with them in this spot. Said New Hampshire is a 3-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take them on the money line. Semi-total at a 127, so I'm also going to be in on this 128.5 to 129.5 under. 306, 513, 306, 514. Long Island is going to be on the road against Lemoyne. Lemoyne is a home underdog of 1 to 1.5 points. 146.5 to 147.5 is the total. This semi-total at a 152.5. I like the over. You've got a Lemoyne team that's just absolutely getting cooked from 3-point range outside the top 340 in terms of their own opponent's 3-point shooting percentage. Now, both of these teams have been relatively okay in terms of their 3-point shooting percentage, and if you look on the inside for this LIU team, they've actually been relatively solid in terms of hitting their interior shots, a top 125 team in terms of their 2-point shooting percentage in a road/neutral venue. Meanwhile, you've got a Lemoyne team that's been pretty solid in terms of executing down low, about 149 in terms of their own 2-point shooting percentage as well. Long Island has just had a big-time issue taking care of the ball, 342nd in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. Not much better for Lemoyne. They're about 308th in the country, and for Long Island, they're the team that's a little bit better in terms of generating turnovers. Top 175 team there. For Lemoyne, they're about 267th, but I do think that for Long Island, they do find a way to get the job done because you've got a trio of guys that are really like Greg Echo Gordon has been able to give you 15 points, 5.5 boards. He only shoots about 30% from three. Jabal Fuller, though, he shoots 47.5% from three, 5.5 boards, 15.5 points per game. Malachi Davis is able to give you 15.5 points, 4 assists per contest as well. And then you've got the ancillary guys like a Shadrick Lassou, who's been a little bit of a disappointment this year, but he's still able to give you a block, 4 rebounds per game. And for Lemoyne, you do have a guy in Shiloh Jackson who should be the best overall rebounder in this game. He's been supplying the team with about 8.5 boards, 14.5 points per game, but this team is still outside the top 275 in terms of offensive rebound percentage. And Long Island games, they involve a lot of second and third chances. Long Island, 21st in the country in terms of offensive rebound percentage. They rebound over 35% of their missed shots. They're also outside the top 320 in terms of defensive rebound percentage, so they give up a lot of second and third chances. And for this bunch in Lemoyne, they've actually been a top 100 team in terms of opponent's 2-point shooting percentage, but I think that goes downward a little bit here. You got Trent Mascara give you 13.5 points, 5.5 boards, shoots 37.5% from three-point range, and then you've had Tennessee Rainwater, that's his actual name, shoot over 50% from three, 8 points per game. I think that you get some late game fouls here. I do think that in the end, Long Island is going to be able to pull it out, get the job done, as you've got a bunch in Lemoyne that's about country average with regards to their free throw shooting percentage. Long Island, they're only draining about 64% of their free throws, but I do think that their interior play just a little bit stronger to be able to pull it out. Semi-line at 2.5, willing to lay up to a deuce here with Long Island, and like the over, semi-total at a 152.5, 306.515, 306.516. McNeese is going to be on the road facing off against Texas A&M Corpus Christi. Corpus Christi is a home underdog of 7.5 points, 141.5 is the total. Semi-line at 6.5, so you're at a 7+, I'm going to be willing to take those points. I do think that McNeese is going to be able to make this game very, very sloppy. They're number 2 in all of college basketball in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and for Texas A&M Corpus Christi, in their home games specifically, 18th in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, so that pushes me on the under. I sub my total at a 136.5. You do have a McNeese team that has been quite a bit more effective with their offense. Corpus Christi right now, 327th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Meanwhile, for McNeese, they're hovering more around about 63rd. They do experience a drop-off of about 18.5 points fewer per 100 possessions away from home rather than at home. And for McNeese, you've been able to get really good production from the outside from DJ Turn It Up Richards, 9.5 points per contest, shoots 41% for three. Javon Garcia shoots 39% for three. Tyson Archie shoots 38% from three-point range as well. Team that's not necessarily going to hold up with regards to giving up second and third chances outside the top 300 in terms of defensive rebound percentage, but a top 55 team in terms of offensive rebound percentage, so both they and their opponents get a lot of second and third chances. But McNeese, at the very least, they take care of the ball. They're a top 50 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, but they're also outside the top 175 in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage as well. And for the Texas A&M Corpus Christi team, they've dealt with a lot of injuries to begin the season in the backcourt, as Nick Shamboyo always have a tough time with that last name. He comes in from Denver, and he has been able to do a nice job in terms of being able to give this team right around about 11 points per contest. It's the Corpus Christi team that has been able to get about 6.5 boards, 11 points per game out of Sheldon Williams, who's been giving you a bit of versatility, shooting 33% from three. Mason Gibson shoots 41.5% from the outside, and Corpus Christi has been a top 225 team in terms of their own three-point shooting percentage. They really do a nice job in terms of guarding the arc as well. They're a top 75 team in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage as well. Corpus Christi has been a top 150 team in terms of their overall rebound percentage, so I do think that Corpus Christi is going to be able to hold in there in a game that's going to involve a lot of sloppiness and a lot of turnovers. And then you got Gawari Duel, who's been very versatile for McNeese, not necessarily the greatest scorer, but about 4 boards, 4 assists per contest. So semi-line at 6.5, won't take 7+ here with Corpus Christi, and like that under, I did set my total at a 136.5, 306.517, 306.518. Alabama A&M and Alabama State are doing battle. This is actually a neutral court game out there at the Mitchell Center with Alabama State 1.5 point favorites. 145.5 to 148.5 is the total, and is at a total of a 143.5. I do like the under. Now it's an Alabama State team that's looking to play at a pretty brisk pace in terms of total possessions per game, 88th in all of college basketball. Alabama A&M 266th in terms of total possessions per game, and it's an Alabama A&M team that's left quite a bit of something to be desired on defense. They have fallen outside the top 240 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis into the bunch as outside the top 10 in terms of points per possession in a road/score venue. And Alabama State, it's not necessarily been like the world's greatest offense or anything like that, but if you look at what they do away from home, they have been a top 225 team in terms of points per possession. They have been allowing a lot more turnovers than in the past. They're outside the top 200 in terms of ball security, but this is a unit that they do shoot above 33% for three-point range away from home, with Micah Simpson as John Anderson being your main guys. Anderson shoots 32.5% from 3, 18.5 points, 3.5 assists per contest. Micah Simpson, 14.5 points. He shoots 35% from three-point range. And then you've been able to have Demarion Yates be able to supply the team with about 40% three-point shooting, 7 points, 4 rebounds per game. Flip side, you've got an Alabama A&M team that has been really looking to build themselves much like the Grambling teams of the past because, well, they hired on the Grambling coach and one Mr. Dante Jackson in the offseason, and he's brought with him quite a few of his guys. Contavious Soldier has been able to give you 15.5 points as your main scorer. You've got James Graham, a 40% three-point shooter with about 7.5 points per contest. BJ Eason has been able to give the team 8 rebounds per game, and for Alabama A&M, they're a top 125 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage in a tight spot. They do shoot about 73% at the free throw line. That's relatively solid. They've been a top 250 team in terms of both opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. They just don't put you under too much rest outside the top turner in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. But in the end, I do think that Alabama A&M a little bit better defensively. I think that they're going to be a little bit better on the glass as well. So I do think that they get the job done in a slow down game. So my total at a 143.5. I like the under. After Alabama A&M, I'm going to take them on the money line. I set them as a 1.5 point favorite. 306, 519, 306, 520. And Carter Word is going to be playing us to East Texas A&M. East Texas A&M is a underdog here of 8.5 to 9.5 points. 141.5 to 142.5 is the total line for Carter Word. I did set them as a favorite of 11.5 points. So I'm going to be willing to lay the number for East Texas A&M. They're just really not executing on offense. East Texas A&M right now 344th in all of college basketball in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. And Carter Word is a top 200 team in terms of executing on offense. They're averaging 14.9 points more per 100 possessions when they're at home rather than away from home. And it's an Carter Word team that's able to shoot it quite well from three-point range right now. They shoot at home 40.8% from three-point range. I do think that experiences a little bit of a drop-off moving forward, but still, they've been able to do a great job there. And for East Texas A&M, the one thing that they really do have going for them, they've been a good team in terms of generating turnovers. In a game that is played in a road/score venue, they are a top 60 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but it has been an Carter Word team that has been pretty solid in terms of taking care of the ball. They bring in Taj Stavetsky, who was over at Cleveland State last season. He's been able to do a good job, giving you about 4.5 assists, 17.5 points, shoots 39.5% from three. Davion Bailey is a 36% three-point shooter, 19 points per contest for Carter Word. The one thing that they don't do is really execute down low. They're outside the top 275 in terms of their own two-point shooting percentage. That said, this is a team that's going to be able to do a nice job in terms of dominating the glass. As for East Texas A&M, they're giving themselves no second chances whatsoever. They're outside the top 300 in terms of offensive rebound percentage. And Carter Word, a top 200 team with this regard, with having Jordan Pike be able to supply about 5 to 5.5 rebounds per game, 12.5 points per contest, and then Harold Woods, who comes over from Northeastern, very versatile player, about 8.5 points, 7 boards, a steal per contest. So these guys have been able to do a rock solid job there. And then for East Texas A&M, it's all about Ronnie Harrison in the backcourt. He comes over from Tarleton. He's been able to get the team 15 points per contest. So you have a little bit of life there. But for East Texas A&M, outside of that, this has been a team that's been very, very suspect in terms of their overall offense. They themselves are outside the top 325 in terms of ball security. You do have a few guys here who will pop in from three in Damian Garcia and Vinny Songa, who have been able to combine for about 19.5 points per contest. These two guys combined to shoot about 38% from three-point range. But outside of Ronnie Harrison, you don't have anyone else on the roster that gives you over 5 rebounds per game. Gianni Hunt, who was over at Oregon State when they made the Elite Eight like a decade ago, he's been able to give the team 8.5 points, 4.5 assists to about 2 turnovers per contest, but needs a little bit of help around him, has been a little bit banged up, and I do think that for Carter Word, they do a nice job being able to get the job done. I semi-lined here at a 143.5 with regards to total. I'm in on the over with the just inconsistency of East Texas A&M in terms of just guarding things inside and along the three-point line, so want to lay within Carter Word, and I'm going to be in on the over as well. 306, 521, 306, 522. UMBC is on the road against Binghamton. Binghamton is a home underdog of 5.5 points. 140.5 is the total line. With UMBC, I did set them as a favorite of 7 points. So I'm going to be one to lay the number. For Binghamton, it's just been a no good, very bad, terrible year. It just seems like everyone on the roster is banged up. They were getting darn near a double-double out of Demetrius Lilly. He's currently out of the fold. Now, you do have Zyler Beverly, along Jeremiah Quigley, who have been able to combine for about 25.5 points per contest. They combine to shoot less than 15% from three-point range. I'm not even kidding when I say that. This Binghamton team, they shoot 29.6% from the outside as collective, outside the top 340 in all of college basketball, and they're absolutely getting cooked in the turnover battle. Outside the top 320 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, outside the top 300 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on offense, and on offense, outside the top 345 in terms of offensive rebound percentage. percentage. Like right now, Beverly, who stands 6'9", gives you about 5 rebounds per game. He's the lone guy on the roster that's healthy that gives you over 4.2 rebounds per game, and UMBC is not necessarily a team that you think of as being a stout team down low, and it's not like there's some sort of amazing team that's given themselves a whole bunch of second and third chances. UMBC is 336th in the country in terms of offensive rebound percentage, but at the very least, they don't allow you to be able to get second and third chances. 71st in the country in terms of their defensive rebound percentage. You've been able to have the transfer from Columbia do a nice job as he was missing for a little bit of time in Josh Odowandu, who's been able to give you 7 points, 5.5 rebounds per game. And then in the backcourt, DJ Turn It Up Armstrong, Jalile King, they've been able to combine for 28 points per contest. Armstrong shoots 41% from 3. Ace Valentine shoots 41% from 3. 10.5 points, 4.5 boards, 4.5 assists per contest for UMBC. They're a country average team in terms of taking care of the ball, but against Binghamton, they don't really have to worry about that. They're not a team that's going to put you under duress. They're outside the top tier themselves in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, so that'll help out Binghamton a little bit, but flat out Binghamton just can't shoot this year with UMBC also being a top 175 team in terms of their own 2-point shooting percentage, shot 225 team on the interior as well. I do think that UMBC finds a way to be able to persevere, get the job done. UMBC only shoots about 71% of the free throw line, but this is a Binghamton team that is right now really just reduced to the screws because, man, they have so many injuries that's not even funny. So, circumstance where I did say UMBC as a 7-point favorite, I'm going to be willing to lay the number. Made my total a 139, so here at a 140 plus, I'm going to be in on the under. 306-523, 306-524. It's Bethune-Cookman. They are on the road against Arkansas Pine Bluff, and Pine Bluff is a home underdog of 2.5 points. So this game is 153.5 to 154.5, and with Pine Bluff, I did make them a favorite of 2.5 points, so I'm going to be willing to take a shot on them on the money line. Now, it is a Pine Bluff team that's been inconsistent to say the least, and I think that you can say that about pretty much all SWAC teams, but it's just really hard to back a Bethune-Cookman team that's been so bad on the glass. Right now, they are outside the top 3 in terms of both their defensive and offensive rebound percentages. You've been able to have Daniel Ruzon give you about 4 rebounds per game, and they do now have back in the fold one of the best names in all of college basketball, Dr. Bradley, who he's been back for about 3 games, hasn't necessarily made the impact that he did over at Pine Bluff, and that is his former school, so this is going to be a nice rivalry there, but you do have the Heedy brothers for Bethune-Cookman combining for about 27.5 points per contest. Jacoby Heedy shoots 43% from 3. Quentin Heedy, he shoots 35% from 3-point range, and on the flip side of things, you've got an Arkansas Pine Bluff team that has been able to really rely upon 2 guys. Keon Williams, he actually was last season the top scorer over at Albany. Christian got kicked off the team, so he joined midstream, and he's been able to pick it up right away. 16.5 points, 8.5 boards, 6 assists per contest, shoots 36% from 3, and then Jaquan Scott shoots 35.5% from the outside. He's been able to spy about 15.5 points per game. It's a Pine Bluff team that has just had a tough time taking care of the ball outside the top 3 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, but get this game in a tight spot. They shoot about 77% of the free throw line. That is a top 50 mark in the country. This has been about a country average team with their 3-point shooting. They're well inside the top 3 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but so is Bethune-Cookman, and for Bethune-Cookman, they're just not executing on the inside. They're outside the top 300 with regards to their own 2-point shooting percentage, relatively decent 3-point shooting team, so I think that you're going to get plenty of points up on the board in a game that involves 2 teams that are really looking to crank up the tempo. Bethune-Cookman is about 100th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, 101st to be exact. Pine Bluff is 40th, so set a total of 162.5. I like the over, and with Pine Bluff, made them the 2.5 point favorite. I like them here on the money line. 306-525, 306-526. Lehigh is going to be playing with Loyola Maryland. Loyola Maryland is a 4.5 to a 5.5 point favorite. So on this game, it's between 145.5 to 147.5, and with Lehigh, I set them as a 6.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number for Loyola Maryland. This team has been doing a rough job in terms of allowing second and third chances in a roadside court venue. They are giving up 31% of opponents' missed shots as an offensive rebound. Now, Lehigh, they themselves outside the top 10 in terms of defensive rebound percentage. That said, for this Lehigh team, they've been able to do a relatively okay job of being able to stroke it from 3-point range. They shoot about 33.7% from the outside. Interestingly, they shoot 36% from 3 away from home, 29.4% at home, and you do have a Loyola Maryland team that is a top 150 team in terms of their own 2-point shooting percentage. That said, this is not a team that's really going to put you under too much stress, and for Loyola Maryland, they've had a little bit of a tough time taking care of the ball outside the top 225 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis in a roadside court venue. And for Lehigh, what I really like here is this year Whitlock, 19 points, 2.5 assists per contest, hit a big 3 that sent their game to overtime against Boston U about a week or so ago, shoots 38.5% from 3-point range, and then you had a 45% 3-point shooter, Hank Alvey, who gives you 7 rebounds per game. Eduardo Benoit has been able to give you about 6 rebounds per contest, 14 points per game. He was missing towards the beginning part of the season, has now given the team 16 plus points points and 7+ rebounds in 4 out of the last 5 games. So he has made a big impact, and that's a guy that really doesn't get taken into account with regards to all the metrics for this team. Meanwhile, for Loyola Maryland, I do think that the backcourt is relatively solid. Braden Speed has been able to come in there, give you about 9 to 10 points per contest. Not necessarily the most amazing three-point shooter, but he does shoot about 35% from the outside. He and Jacob Theodosu combine for about 3 steals per game, and Theodosu is able to give you 15 points per game, but except for a Lehigh team that has been a little bit hit or miss with regards to the outside shooting. The fact that this Loyola Maryland team is outside the top 290 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage is going to be able to help them out big time. Loyola Maryland outside the top 250 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis as well. And in a tight spot, Loyola Maryland, they shoot 66.2% the free throw line. That is well outside the top 325 in all of college basketball. And Lehigh, they shoot more around about 72% in the charity stripe. So I do think that Lehigh does find a way to get the job done in a game that is not going to involve great rebounding. I did set my total here at a 142.5. You've got a pair of teams that are relatively mid-tempo with Loyola Maryland 176th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Lehigh, they're checking in 171st. So in on the under, and I'm willing to lay up to 6 here with Lehigh 3 of 6-5-27, 3 of 6-5-28. New Haven is on the road against Chicago State, and Chicago State is a 1.5-point home underdog. 127.5 to 130.5 is the total, mostly seeing 130.5, and I do like the 130.5 to the over. I'm willing to take that as my max. I set my total at a 131, despite the fact that New Haven, they're outside the top 350 in terms of total possessions per game. As a matter of fact, 365th out of 365 teams. They rank 307th in terms of their turnovers on a per possession basis on offense. Both of these teams are actually outside the top 320 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Chicago State's 350th, 355th for New Haven. Neither of these teams are great on defense. New Haven has actually been the far superior defense, 234th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Chicago State is well outside the top 300, but Chicago State, about a country average team in terms of generating turnovers, and it feels like they're just finding a little bit of offensive swagger with having so many guys like Doyle Cockrell, Braylon Bush that were missing for a few games to start the season coming back, and CJ Ray is the only guy in the roster that gives you over 4 rebounds per game along Stephen Byard. They both give you between 4 and 4.1 rebounds per game, but they've been able to do a nice job in tandem. You've got a New Haven team that coming up from the D2 ranks, they just don't have a lot of size in general. You do have Jabari Fitzpatrick, who's done a solid job supplying double figures, 2.5 assists, 5 rebounds per game, and with this New Haven team, they do shoot as a collective about 30% from 3-point range. They don't grab a lot of second and third chances, not allowing a ton of second and third chances, but it's really unimpressive the way that they guard the 3-point line. They're outside the top 300 in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, and with Chicago State having absolutely nothing on the inside, that's going to be able to help them out quite a bit. And Chicago State, at home, they allow teams to only shoot about 30.5% from 3-point range. Again, with New Haven having no size whatsoever, that's going to help them out. And then Marcus Sankersley, about 14 points per contest. It is a Chicago State team that if they can get to the free throw line, they are shooting about 75.7% of the charity stripe. That's a top 75 mark in all of college basketball. I think that that's just enough for them to get the job done in a game where I do think they get some late game foulings because both of these teams are rather pathetic. I think that it's going to be a close game that Chicago State pulls out. I set my line at 5, willing to lay with Chicago State, and I'm going to be in on a 130.5 or less to the over. 3 of 6-5-29, 3 of 6-5-30. UTU, Rio Grande Valley is going to be playing us to Southeast Louisiana. Southeast Louisiana is a underdog here of 5.5 points. 135.5 is the total, and did set my total at a 135.5. Saw a stray 135 a little bit earlier. If we can get down to that, I am going to be in on the over, as you got a Southeast Louisiana team that just isn't the same defensively as they have been in the past. They're outside the top 150 now in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and with this Rio Grande Valley team, it's been a little bit hit or miss for them on defense, but they've improved quite a bit. They're up to about 165th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They used to be absolutely terrible defensively, and for Grand Valley, they've got some of the most interesting 3-point shooting splits that you're going to find. For Grand Valley, right now, they shoot 31.6% from 3-point range at home and 40.6% away from home, and Southeast Louisiana is just bad with their 3-point shooting percentage. 359 shooting, 26% from 3-point range away from home. But for Southeast Louisiana as well, they just don't have the same interior play that they've had in past seasons. They lose Brody Woodbury, who went on over to Idaho, and for Southeast Louisiana, right now, the lone guy that's really been able to give you over 5 rebounds per game, that would be Isaiah Gaines, was part of that Florida Atlantic team that made the Final Four. About 11 points, 5.5 boards, a block, a steal per contest, and then Jeremy Alizi is able to give you 11.5 points, right around about 1.3 steals per contest. For Southeast Louisiana, they're not even executing on the inside. They're outside the top 275 with regards to their own 2-point shooting percentage. Not too bad on the boards, but right now they've been outside the top 240 in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, and I think that that's going to bode very well for a UT Rio Grande Valley team that they've got some relatively good guard play, and they're not doing the world's worst job in terms of flowing good, clean possessions. They turn the ball over about 12 times per contest. That's country average. Corey Cotton along with Phil Brankovic have been able to combine for about 24.5 points per contest. Brankovic shoots 37.5% from three. Marvin McGee from the meet. Cal State Bakersfield Roadrunners has been able to supply about 9.5 points. He shoots 41% from three-point range, and Julian Gomez is all of a sudden shooting 46% from three-point range as well. It is a Grand Valley team that is very content to take a lot of shots from three-point range, and for Grand Valley, they've actually been relatively solid with regards to their interior defense. They become a top 140 team in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage. They're doing a good job in terms of being able to guard the arc as well. They're just not doing a great job in terms of giving themselves second and third chances outside the top 250 in terms of their offensive rebound percentage, and they don't get to the free throw line often, but they do shoot about 72.5% at the free throw line. It's a Southeast Louisiana team that in a tight spot they only shoot about 69.5% at the free throw line. I do think the Grand Valley going to be looking to bump up their tempo a little bit more. They become about a country average team, a little bit below that in terms of total possessions per game, right around about 251st. Southeast Louisiana, once again, pretty slow and controlled at about their 10th, but with the way that they don't guard the three-point line, I think the Grand Valley finds a way to get the job done at a 135 or less. I'm in on the over, and I'm willing to lay up to 7 here with Grand Valley. 36-531, 36-532. It is Nichols. They play us to Stephen F. Austin. Stone cold Stephen F. Austin, a 3.5 point road favorite. Turn on game 143.5 to 144.5, and with Stephen F. Austin, made them a 7.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. Stephen F. Austin not generating turnovers the way that they have in the past. They're about 199th in the country in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but they have ascended to becoming a top 30 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis because they are absolutely decimating teams on the glass. They're a top 75 team in terms of rebound percentage. It is Christmas, Krishan Christmas, 7 points, 7 rebounds per game. Jared Colonel comes over from Northwestern State, only gives you 5 points per game, but 2.8 blocks, 7.5 rebounds per game. Keon Thompson, 16.5 points, 4.5 assists, 5 rebounds. And then you got Nenad Chudakovinic, who's been able to shoot about 42% from three-point range. And for Stephen F. Austin, this is a group that does a really good job in terms of taking care of the ball themselves. They're a top 50 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. Now, I am willing to lay it despite the fact that Stephen F. Austin is shooting 64.5% at the free throw line. That's absolutely terrible, to say the least. And for Nichols, their bread is buttered with generating turnovers. They're a top 12 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. Sincere Malone has sincerely been really versatile. 3 assists, 2 steals, 11.5 points per contest, shoots 34.5% from three-point range, and then you've got your top 2 scorers in Jalik Dunkley along Jalen Surreals being able to combine for about 28 points per contest, and Surreals is now shooting about 41% from 3. Nichols was just absolutely terrible in their first few games of the season in terms of being able to launch from three-point range. All of a sudden, they're 64th in the country in terms of their own three-point shooting percentage, but for Stephen F. Austin, they are a much better team in terms of guarding the perimeter than they've been in past seasons. For Stephen F. Austin, right now, they do rank in the top 30 in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, and it's a Stephen F. Austin team that's going to be looking to play relatively mid-tempo. Same with Nichols. Nichols is about 197th of the country in terms of total possessions per game. Stephen F. Austin actually quite a bit slower than that. They're about 282nd in the country, and I do think that Stephen F. Austin, they're going to be able to find a way to get the job done against a Nichols team that, while they do a great job in terms of generating turnovers, they themselves can be a little bit sloppy with the ball with regards to their offense, as they are turning the ball over about 12 times per contest and just on the best on the inside, outside the top 10 with regards to opponents' two-point shooting percentage. So with Stephen F. Austin, I'm willing to lay it with them. I set them as a 7.5 point favorite, made by a total of 139.5. So I'm also in on the under 306.533, 306.534. New Orleans is going to be playing us to Lamar. Lamar is a 1.5 point road favorite. Total on this game 145.5. And with Lamar, I set them as a 1 point favorite. So at 1.5 plus, I'm going to be willing to take the points with New Orleans. This New Orleans team has been able to do a pretty rock solid job down low. They're just getting destroyed on the turnover battle. Outside the top 275 in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. Outside the top 275 in terms of taking care of the ball. And they do face off against a Lamar team that has actually shot it well from three-point range when they've been away from home. They're shooting at a road/shoot score venue about 34.9% from three-point range. That is a top 140 mark in all of college basketball. And with this Lamar group, you've got good versatility out of Andrew Holyfield, about 14 points, 5 boards, and from three-point range, he's been able to shoot about 34.5% from three-point range. Cody Pennebaker has been able to shoot 37.5% from three-point range. Rob Lee's able to give you about 15 points per game, and with this bunch in Lamar, they've been able to do a relatively solid job in terms of holding up with opponents' two-point shooting percentage. Top 100 there. They themselves are outside the top 275 in terms of their own two-point shooting percentage, and I do think that New Orleans is actually going to be able to hold in there because they do a nice job at the free throw line. Lamar's country average team shooting about 71% at the charity stripe, and New Orleans have the world's greatest team at getting to the free throw line, but they shoot over 75% when they're there, and you've got two guys in the backcourt that I really like in Ja'Cavion Buckley, your main facilitator, 14.5 points, 5 boards, 5 assists, shoots about 36% from 3. Colton Benson shoots 90% of the charity stripe, 15 points, 35.5% three-point shooting, and then Churchill Abus actually was seeing good playing time over at DePaul and Wake Forest, 6.5 points, 5 boards, pair blocks per contest. MJ Thomas about 11 points, 8 rebounds per game, and with this New Orleans team. They've been rather suspect with regards to their own 2-point shooting percentage, but they're about a country average team with their 3-point shooting percentage. They just need to take better care of the ball. Right now for this Lamar team, they themselves have been turning the ball over a little bit too much outside the top 10 in terms of ball security, a top 100 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. So do think that things get a little bit scrambled and a little bit herky-jerky. Semi-total at a 145, so at the 145.5 and on the under, but anything above a point, willing to take the points here with New Orleans. 306, 535, 306, 536. You've got Northwestern State. They are on the road against Houston Christian. Houston Christian is a 2.5 to a 3.5 point favorite. 139.5 is the total. I actually said Northwestern State as 1.5 point favorite. I'm going to be one to take them on the money line. Right now, the main kryptonite for Northwestern State, they're outside the top 10 in terms of their rebound percentage, but much of that is due to the fact that they were without Willie Williams for the first, I would say 6 or so games of the season, and he's given the team 8.5 points, 8.5 rebounds per game. He is the lone guy on the roster give you over 3.2 rebounds per game. Is Chris Mabrew gives you 3.2 rebounds at about 8 points per contest. It is a Northwestern State team that's been a relatively solid 3-point shooting team, though. They shoot about 34.5% from 3. They're a top 125 team with regards to their free throw shooting percentage as well. So they've been able to do a relatively solid job with their guard play. You've got Micah Thompson, who's been able to give you about 14 points per contest, shoots just below 40% from 3-point range, and you got a Houston Christian team that they're just really not giving you a whole heck of a lot around the outside. They do shoot about 34.5% from 3-point range at home. They're overall about 232nd in the country with regards to their 3-point shooting percentage, but they don't generate any sort of turnovers on defense. They've had a tough time taking care of the ball on offense. On offense, this team, in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, is about 280th in all of college basketball, and they're a super duper slow team, about 343rd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Northwestern State is not looking to fly out. They're 297th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and while I mentioned that Northwestern State has been so bad on the glass, it's not like Houston Christian has done a great job either. Houston Christian's not allowing a lot of second and third chances, so they've been a top 275 team in terms of rebound percentage. You don't have a single guy on this roster, though, that gives you over 4.5 rebounds per game, and that'd be Elijah Brooks, who's been dealing with injury all season long. You do have Kylan Green, who's been able to give you 11.7 points, 4.5 assists, 4.5 rebounds, shoots 34% for 3, and Trent Johnson, 8.5 points, 3.5 boards. He does shoot 43% for a 3-point range, but it is a Houston Christian team that is just getting absolutely cooked with regards to the overall opponent's percentages. Outside the top 290 in terms of opponent's 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage, and in a tight spot, they shoot 67% at the free throw line. That is well outside the top 325, and I do think that Northwestern State finds a way to persevere, get the job done. I said Northwestern State as a 1.5 point favorite. I do like them on the money line. Maybe my total 141.5. I do think that both teams are just that bad on defense that even in a low possession game, you get the over. So do like the over, and Northwestern State on the money line, 36, 537, 36, 538. You have Mississippi Valley State playing us for A&M. A&M is a road favorite of 12.5 points. 138.5 to 140.5 is the total, and for Florida A&M, I did set them as a favorite of 10.5 points, so I'm actually willing to take the points here with Mississippi Valley State. Now, I wasn't going to be willing to do so if I didn't see Michael James in their previous game. Michael James has been really the top player for Mississippi Valley State. Don't know why, but last Monday he was out of the fold for the team, but he's back, giving you about 20.5 points, 2.5 assists per contest. Daniel Mayfield has been dealing with injury all throughout the season, but he was back in that game against Bethune-Cookman as well, on a rather limited sort of basis, but still, he's been able to give the team about 5.9 rebounds per game, and that's big because Mississippi Valley State is awful on every metric. They're outside the top 340 in terms of points scored and points allowed on a per possession basis. In terms of rebound percentage, turnovers on a per possession basis on offense. They actually generate a few turnovers on defense, but not great to say the least. But this Florida A&M team, who are they to be laying this sort of a number on the road? I recognize that Mississippi Valley State is terrible. That said, for both of these teams, they're looking to play a little bit more up-tempo. Florida A&M is about 48th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Mississippi Valley State is about 99, so you're going to get plenty of possessions in this game, but Florida A&M 356th in all of college basketball in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. They don't take care of the ball whatsoever. This has been a unit that has been able to pop it a little bit from 3. They shoot about 32.2% from 3, but they're absolutely getting destroyed down low themselves. And for Florida A&M, you've been able to get good production of Jaquan Sanders, who's been able to fly about 13 points, 2.8 assists per contest, and then Mike Octave, who was injured for about 9 games this season. He's come back, 10.5 points, 8.5 boards. That really elevates their play down the line. He's been able to shoot 40% from 3 on a very, very small sample size, but that said, for this bunch, they're also outside the top 3 in terms of opponent's 3-point shooting percentage. They're giving up tons of opportunities at the free throw line, and if they have to hit free throws to be able to cover this number, this Florida A&M team, 350th in the country at 65.2%. Mississippi Valley State is absolutely terrible, but I do think that they hold within this number. I set my line at 10.5, so I'm going to be willing to take the 12 plus here. And I do like the over with how many possessions you get. So my total at a 146.5, 306.5, 39, 306.5, 40. Alcorn State is going to be playing against Prairie View. Prairie View is a 1.5 to 2.5 point road favorite. So on this game, it's 153.5. I like the over. I saw my total at a 161. You've got an Alcorn State team as well outside the top 350 in terms of their points allowed on a per possession basis. Alcorn State has actually been able to generate a few turnovers to their credit, but that's really where Prairie View's bread is buttered. Prairie View is 34th in the country in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and it travels relatively well as well. When a game in a road/neutral square venue, they are a top 30 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. Now, you've got an Alcorn State team that's actually shot it relatively well from three-point range. For Alcorn State, they are right now shooting 36% from three-point range. Interestingly, 25% at home, 36.8% away from home, and Prairie View, they shoot about 33.5% from three. That's a top 200 mark, so I think that you've got the makings here of an over, especially with the way that Prairie View just absolutely guns it, 18th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Alcorn State, they're fast, they're not warp speed fast, 110th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, but that's that Prairie View is always bad on the glass or back outside the top 320 in terms of their overall rebound percentage, but that's going to be mitigated by the fact that Alcorn State does not have a single player that gives you over 5 rebounds per game. Like Corey Wells, he has been Wells for this Prairie View team, 7 boards, 2.5 assists, 14.5 points per contest, and Cherion Joseph, a few seasons ago, was a 20-point per game score over at Southern. He's scoring 20 points once again, 21.6 points, stealing half per contest, shoots 32% from 3. Dante Horn is able to shoot 36.5% from 3, 15 points per contest, and then for Alcorn State, it's just a very much mixed match sort of team for this bunch right now. You've got Shane Lancaster, who's been able to give you 11.5 points. He actually shoots 52% from 3-point range, and then from there, you've got essentially 4 different guys, Davion Williams, Jameel Morris, Tyson McDaniels, and Nick Woodyard. That will give you between 7.9 and 9.5 points per contest. No rebounding with this team whatsoever for Alcorn State. They are outside the top 350 in terms of ball security, and I think that Prairie View turns those turnovers. They get some good looks, and Prairie View should be able to exploit a Alcorn team that's in the bottom 5 in terms of opponent's 2-point shooting percentage. So, semi-line-7, I'm willing to lay with Prairie View, and I like the over, so my total 161. Wrap things up with 306, 541, 306, 542. Jackson State is playing us to Texas Southern. Texas Southern, an underdog of 1.5 to 2.5 points, 156.5 is the total. So my total 153. I do like the under. Now, you do have a Texas Southern team that's been looking to really bump up the tempo in terms of total possessions per game. They clock in at about 65th in the country. They've been slowing down here in SWAC playing. For Texas Southern, they are right now outside the top 300 in terms of their 3-point shooting percentage. In games played away from them, they shoot 26.6% from 3-point range. That is a bottom 30 mark in all of college basketball. It's a Texas Southern team that's outside the top 340 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. They're outside the top 220 in terms of generating turnovers. And this is a Jackson State team that's just been absolutely awful themselves. But at the very least, they've got a little bit more chemistry for the Texas Southern team. Out of your top 10 scorers, 9 of them have missed multiple games as far this season, so they're still searching for their rotation. Meanwhile, for Jackson State, you now have DeJohnny Thomas healthy. He was over at Southern last season. He's been their top rebounder when he's been healthy at 4.9 rebounds per game. That elevates them a little bit. Dorian McMillan, Jamie Mitchell, these guys have some versatility in the backcourt. They've been able to combine for about 23.5 points per contest. Between the two of them, you get about 8.6 rebounds per game, and Deshaun Ruffin, he's the best player in this game, 21.5 points, 5 assists, shooting about 32% from 3-point range, was actually seeing good minutes over at Ole Miss a few seasons ago. Now, for this Jackson State team, they're outside the top 330 in terms of both their own 2-point shooting percentage and opponent's 2-point shooting percentage. Not like this Texas Southern team has been able to do a whole heck of a lot better, but good news for them is that Alex Anderson is back in the fold. He was missing for quite a bit of time. He's been able to slide the team with about 10 points. You just don't have that main facilitator. Right now, for Bryce Roberts, he's back 2.5 assists, about 12 points per contest, but for Texas Southern, outside the top 300 with regards to their opponent's 2-point shooting percentage and their own 2-point shooting percentage, both of these teams turn the ball over left and right. Even though you're going to get an up-tempo game, I think that there's just too many wasted possessions for the over, and with Texas Southern shooting as badly as they do from 3-point range, they shoot less than 70% at the free throw line. Jackson State, at the very least, they knock down some of their free throws at about 76%. I do think that Jackson State finds a way to be able to get the job done here against the Texas Southern team that very much fouls a ton. So, semi-line at 7, willing to lay with Jackson State, and I'm going to be in on the over, and that'll wrap things up for the Monday edition of Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Big thanks to Rocco Miller, BackCouture.org, for joining me in the live segment. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcast, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one or two ways we help fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at @G_81. Keep in mind, large DM, they mean does not matter, so per usual, please do send these into the timeline. The other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via the 5-star review, and I'll be with you guys every single day with fixing analysis on every game every day, so I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.